Events begin with a huge battle reminiscent of a world war. But it's not all that simple. After all, the two warring factions are ruled by humans and they run their own game, each with their own tactics, and there is only one winner. One faction is under the command of a player named Nebula, while the other worships the god Hegemony. Each troop demonstrates its unique characteristics and strategies while under the control of its commanders. The protagonist Choi Sung-woon, a player under the nickname Nebula, decides to strike with nuclear weapons. Even so, the Hegemony player was prepared for this outcome. Hegemony has struck back with its missiles in the name of faith. Nebula realized they were interceptor missiles the enemy had prepared well. The interceptor missiles couldn't keep up with his warheads. One of them headed towards the center of the enemy Imperial Palace, where a huge number of orgs prayed to their god Hegemony to save them. If this were real, prayers wouldn't save anyone. However, this is just a lost world. In him, faith and prayers are always productive, just as the spirit of the demon materialized, who, through their faith, saved the orgs from imminent death. Choi Sung-woon was not surprised by this outcome. As expected, the opponent was using the Holy Oak strategy. A player named Hegemony openly bragged about this strategy, as he had the second rank of the server, and ridiculed Nebula in every way for his attempts to somehow outdo his rival. It was clear to the boy now why Hegemony fought with such confidence. Though the peculiarity of the orc race and allows you to quickly expand the population of the people. How could he gain so much faith so quickly? He chose the sky, the largest space, and used special checks. He was surreptitiously preparing to fight back against technological civilization. Attempting to summon the spirit of an apostle was also a good idea, however, it was obvious to Nebula. He realized that there was a space bigger than the sky, and that was what was above him. Hegemony was surprised that the enemy had weapons of mass destruction. He shouted to the demon spirit to stop it or it would destroy their entire palace. Nebula said it was impossible, several tungsten rods falling on him. And given the accumulated gravitational acceleration, it's too late. There's no stopping them. When the tungsten rod made contact with the ground, everything around it was destroyed. The emperor died, and the underground temple was destroyed along with his palace. The faith that Hegemony had carefully nurtured had simply deteriorated. And when faith disappears, all the apostles disappear with it. In the end, Nebula won the duel and remained in first place. The enraged Hegemony didn't realize what it was and demanded a rematch. Next time he would definitely win. Nebula thought for a moment, but still decided not to accept his request. He wondered if he'd gotten something new, but nothing ever happened. There were no updates to the game at all. He completed the achievement of holding the first ranked spot. Just before the guy decided to close the game, he suddenly got a notification. The system alerted that he was the only one who could achieve all the achievements. The guy was a bit confused. Was it early access? Will there be an official release of the game? However, it is allowed to be shown privately before the official release. Eager to see what else this game had to offer, he agreed to this venture. A multitude of incomprehensible codes appeared before his eyes. He saw his in-game avatar named Nebula. Some sort of magic circle shone in front of him, and all around him were just stone ruins. The guy thought it was some kind of dream, but everything around him seemed too real. Some wanderer came up behind him and told him it wasn't a dream. The guy had been chosen. As it turned out, it was a woman who greeted the guy warmly. He wondered how they knew his real name. And what did it all mean anyway? Choi Sung-woon saw shadows. Were they really people like him? Wanderer said that some of the players already know her. They hide their faces to keep the game fair. And since everyone was already interested, she decided to get right to the point. Putting her hands up, she showed them the ground. This is the very place where our main character lived. A world he had seen many times before. The same lost world. The woman said that in this lost world he had become a true god. Nebula heard nothing, but could feel her, the confusion of those around her. Wanderer said that this lost world is not just a game. It is a land abandoned by the gods of the past. There used to be an incredible civilization that thrived on this planet. Different races lived in harmony. However, for reasons unknown, the gods left this world. Because of this, it was time for new gods. She talked about how the Lost World game was created to find suitable candidates for the role of the god of this planet. Nebula can try to become a real god. It would be very similar to the Lost World. No one will believe in him at first, but if he can give his people a reason to believe in him, Nebula will become the only god of this planet and will be able to do whatever she wants. All his dreams will become instantly realizable if he becomes God. The boy asked what would happen if he surrendered. The woman replied that if he surrendered now, he would go back to his world. However, the guy would forget everything that had just happened. He wondered what if he gave up during the competition. The woman replied to him that he would no longer have that opportunity once the game started. The next question immediately followed. What would happen if he was defeated by another god? She replied that, in that case, he would have a divine end. Does that really mean they are all risking their lives? Did he have any reason to give up? The boy was adamant that he certainly didn't. The woman told him it was time to make a choice. If he wanted to surrender, he could do it now, and those who choose to continue will begin their adventure with a small race. He realized it was just like a game, so he'd have to choose one of the lower races first. However, the people had already begun to give up. One by one, they began to leave the lost world. Methinks the initial number of people converges to the maximum number of players, and there were 32, so there's only 27 left. Suddenly, the woman said he could be the first choice. Nebula wondered if the choice is given by place in the ranking system. Before I could say a word, the guy disappeared in a flash. Looks like a portal opened. He was transported to a small corner of land surrounded by a forest and a river. Different creatures lived in this river. However, they were very different from those who lived on the earth. Frogs hunt fish and they can talk. Having caught a big fish, the frogs were glad that at last it was not bugs for dinner, but such a delicacy. Suddenly one of the frogs saw some unusual butterfly that happened to fly past them. They had never seen such a beautiful butterfly, which is why they focused their attention on it. That butterfly turned out to be one of Nebula's scouts. She told him about the humanoid frogs. Looking at the cards, he realized that the small race of insects had the lowest percentage of victories. It all depended on how to play out, though. Insects are comparable to birds, and they are quite useful at the beginning of the journey. He realized that the point of emergence was at the eastern edge of the continent. He doesn't think a lot of battles are expected at the beginning of the game. Because of the enrichment strategy in the early stage of the game, early aggression will not be easy to utilize. Nebula decided that in that case, the starting race should be those who eat insects such as humanoid frogs. But he is concerned about the number of tribes. There are about 500 of them. It is difficult for him to choose the right tribe to start the game. In the Lost World, the player's influence on creatures is directly related to their level of faith. 10 faith isn't enough for him to get those frogs to do anything. Wondering what other tribes were around, he saw humanoid lizards. They too feed on insects and are able to survive without water. Nebula realized that it looked like they had separated from the main group, which was just to his advantage. As it turned out, there were wounded and old men in this race. One of the specimens was even seriously injured. It looks like he used to be in the core group, but was driven out by a power struggle. The more he feels that the whole world has abandoned him, the harder it is for him to live. He thinks that in this case, it will be easier for him to find God by getting a small miracle. Nebula considers him such a fragile creature that he decided to start with him. The group of humanoid lizards continued their journey through the desert. Because of the intensely scorching sun, their faces showed great exhaustion. A wounded gazelle appeared before their eyes. They couldn't believe it was real. Since they hadn't eaten meat in a long time, everyone rushed sharply in her direction. The wounded and old men watching from the sidelines realized that they were unlikely to get any meat. Only bones remained of the badly wounded gazelle, but one of the lizards said there was still food left. There's still marrow in that pile of bones. It's very nutritious. As soon as he tried to eat one of the bones, one of his companions took it from his hands. The lizard said they'd had enough. We should leave it to those who can't hunt. Gathering all the bones into a pile, she took them to the old men and the wounded. A drop of happiness appeared on their faces. The healthy lizards asked Jael, did she really want to help them that badly? But that wounded guy, he's going to die soon. His wound is already festering. I mean, he should have been dead a long time ago. It's a wonder he's still standing. Of course, many of them survived because Rak took the brunt of the saber-toothed tiger. And it's certainly to be appreciated. But he's going to die soon anyway, and the living need food. Jael asked how are they not ashamed to say such things. He was the one who saved them. Once night fell, the humanoid lizards decided to take a break for a nap. Rak lay all alone near the others. The throbbing of the wound made him ache with pain. Suddenly opening his eyes, he saw a butterfly fluttering right above his face. As he lifted himself up, the humanoid lizard saw that it was as if she was pointing him toward the top of the mountain. Rakrak's comrades saw that he had finally decided to proudly leave their pack. They decided to do nothing and silently watched everything that was going on. As he climbed higher and higher, Rakrak wondered if this was all a crazy fantasy. It struck him as odd that he was the only one who had noticed her, and maybe that meant something. He wondered what it could be. He kept hoping that it wasn't all for nothing. Rakrak saw a huge pile of bugs and realized it was enough food for his entire group. Nebula said that the humanoid lizard finally beheld a miracle, thanks to the intervention of a god. Watching them devour the donated food, he thought that this amount should be enough for several days. Suddenly he saw that Rakrak decided to tell his kin about the miracle himself. After all, beings with high willpower can decide a lot of things on their own. The Rakrak tribe recognized the divinity of the unnamed bug god. Nebula thought, why a beetle god and not a butterfly god? He said no one gets a pretty name from the start. Rakrak would be important to him from now on, but Nebula would become so to the lizard as well. The next day, Rakrak saw that butterfly again. He wondered if he should follow it again. Looking at the guy, his companions thought about Rakrak having a vision again. Would he really go after him? He answered them that winter was near, and the bugs were still showing up from where the cold winds were blowing. If they keep going that way, there's a chance they'll all freeze to death. His comrades suggested ignoring the lead and going in the opposite direction. But Rakrak doesn't think that's going to work either. Those lands are completely empty. He wondered what hidden meaning there was in his visions. He doesn't know it himself. The humanoid lizard has nothing else to do but follow them. Nebula realizes they have little faith, but there's nothing they can do about it in the beginning. To be more precise, he needs a lot more faith. But if Rakrak believes in him, a better future awaited him than he could have ever dreamed of. Climbing to the very top of the mountain, Rakrak shouted to his kin that the nameless bug god had brought them to the refuge. Everyone was delighted with what they saw and applauded Rakrak. It was not for nothing that they believed in him. If Rakrak wants to know what Nebula wants from him, then let him be his priest. Let the humanoid lizard communicate his will to his people. The blessing will help him to do so. After eating enough and looking around at their surroundings, they decided to rest. Firefly sat on his shoulder. This Firefly was Nebula's contact. He put Rakrak into a deep sleep. Rakrak didn't realize what was happening. Is he in a dream or is he imagining it? Seeing his likeness before him, the lizard asked who he was. Holding out his hand, Nebula asked if Rakrak would take it. Not realizing who he was, the lizard asked fearfully what he really wanted. At the snap of Nebula's fingers, a mask appeared in the lizard's hands. Lifting the buffalo skull up, he put it on the nameless beetle god. Rakrak told his kin what he had dreamed during the night. They asked, isn't God's will obvious? He just wants a buffalo sacrificed to him. But they realized that to catch the buffalo they would have to go far into the Badlands. It was too dangerous. The others think jail is wrong because the god who brought them there wants them there. He didn't want to put the tribe in danger. Jail replied that hunting the buffalo was a huge risk to life. The whole tribe would have to fight it to win. She thinks that if they do that, who will look after the old people and the wounded? Rakrak replied that it sounded convincing, and that was why the lizard had decided to go hunting alone. Jail shouted that he couldn't catch the buffalo alone. It was almost impossible. Rakrak said he wasn't going there to die. God gave him a blessing. They may find it hard to believe, but when he woke up, all of his wounds on his arm reached. Plus, his shoulder was covered in black scales. Jail admits it's weird, but that's no reason at all to go after the buffalo alone. Throwing his spear straight into a tree and splitting it in half, Rakrak said, let this be the occasion. His men were shocked. They didn't understand why he was still hiding such power from them. They realized that since he had recently died of his wounds, was it definitely their Rakrak? In an instant, the ground beneath their feet shook. As it turned out, it was a large herd of buffalo. Jail couldn't believe her eyes. She said it couldn't be. A herd of buffalo that was running along their regular routes suddenly took and met them on their way. Rakrak, on the contrary, was happy about the event. He said there was no point in thinking about it. Jumping off the cliff, the lizard shouted that it was time to get rid of his hunger. Rakrak threw his powerful spear, hitting the buffalo squarely in the forehead. Seeing this, the others got excited and decided to support their kin by taking out their guns. Rakrak realized that the god was sending them not only bugs, but the meat itself. Day turned to night again. After a hearty dinner, the lizards created an altar for sacrifice. Rakrak asked the nameless bug god to accept their sacrifice, no matter how pathetic it was. The others similarly bowed their heads and prayed to the god to accept their offering. Nebula thought that although the ritual itself was carelessly performed, it was the sincerity of their intentions that mattered. He received even more faith than he had bargained for at the beginning of his journey. It wasn't a bad rite for a novice priest. Considering the time it took to complete it, it was pretty good. Nebula had a hard time attracting buffaloes because he is not a god of grass eaten by parno-hoofed animals. He had to use completely different methods to accomplish this. Could they really even eat a small buffalo cub? After that, I realized that at this stage of development, it is foolish to expect them to know cattle breeding. It is too early for that. Nebula realized that their tribe was small for this oasis. They would be there for a few years at most. At this point, they know nothing about crop and livestock production. It will be problematic to survive this stage. He realized that knowledge and skills were quite difficult to discover on his own. And you can't speak directly either, or you'll be breaking the rules of the game. You can always find a way, but it will take time. Nebula decided to start with just one blessing. He thought it would be enough to start. Jael saw that Rakrak was already awake, then told her that he had been watching the altar. The humanoid lizard said he had another dream last night. Jael asked if the god was trying to tell them something again. He answered that he was not sure, for he could not explain. The altar shook strangely. There were no more fish in the pond that had protected them for years, and the ground itself had dried up so much that nothing else grew there. Jael told him that it hadn't happened yet. Rakrak said he knew. The boy added that then there was no point in worrying now, for God would take care of them. Rakrak believes in him too, but he realized that any will of God often comes side by side with hardship. If they could not understand his intent, it would be tantamount to betrayal. That's what he's afraid of. Once at the top of the throne, Rakrak saw something, then asked his friend to come up. Staring off into the distance, Jael now realized why the altar was wobbling. It was they who had driven them from the tribe. Jael asked, did they come straight there? Rakrak replied that it was to be expected. Same blue scales as theirs before. They saw that guy was huge. Besides, the guys didn't understand why they were riding such a monster. Rakrak said that judging by their numbers, the entire tribe was on the move. Jael realized that from the looks of it, their homeland, the green swamps, had been completely depleted. She suggested that perhaps the god had taken all the fertile land. Rakrak replied that he did not know that. They thought their oasis was in a hollow in the mountain, hard to see unless you climb the mountain. It's also been suggested that in that case that whole group might just pass on by. One of the lizards dared to shout that this place belonged to the nameless bug god. He made it clear that the blue scale tribe didn't belong there. Holding their heads, Rakrak and Jael remembered that Yura's squad was patrolling today. Rakrak told him not to worry. Maybe that was God's plan. As soon as he grabbed the spear in his hands, Jael asked did he really think the god himself had created such a situation. Rakrak replied that it might not be a test at all, but their mission. A mission to embrace and rescue those who were once their tribesmen. Jael replied that even so, that guy, if he was capable of gaining something spiritual, then he certainly wouldn't insist on kicking out all the weaker members of the tribe. Seeing the butterfly above him, Rakrak now realized for sure that he was not mistaken. This was God's will. It was at that moment that he realized he would do everything in his power. Watching him, Nebula said that Rakrak understood everything exactly as he had intended earlier. These two tribes must unite, all for the sake of increasing the number of believers and technological development. It seemed strange to him that Rakrak himself had made this decision. There seemed to be his high willpower involved there. Her number was 14. Did the guy really think the appearance of the blue scale tribe was his doing? A leader with high willpower. This is clearly going to be a very good thing. If you impose a strong faith on them, he will no longer have to make all the decisions himself. Then, they would definitely be able to follow all of his orders much more effectively. The chief of the blue scale tribe shouted, "What are they doing there? Are they really living?" From Yura's patrol squad, a guy yelled that this was their land. The fat chief, grinning, asked what they had there. They replied that they did not need to know. Rakrak showed up and said they had trees and fertile land, booty, and most importantly God. The leader of the blue scale tribe wondered, what God? Rakrak replied that this place belonged to an unnamed bug god. He said he didn't understand what he was saying either. But that doesn't mean anything, let them go. Let them leave nicely. If they leave now, the chief won't attack them. He doesn't know how many of them are out there, but they certainly can't handle his huge army. The tribal leader said that since time immemorial a leader has needed to know how to count. Pointing his spear in his direction, Rakrak replied that he didn't want to fight him. Unhappy and destitute, all of them can always find shelter in God's arms, and that's when God himself could take care of them. But all he heard in response was a loud laugh. The chief asked if he could not count after all. Rakrak replied that if he thought so, then he did not know God. Saying that it was only nonsense, the leader of the Blue Scale tribe shouted for him to die. Rakrak prayed to the Lord and asked that he be gifted with courage and strength to face the enemy. He gripped his spear tighter and went into battle, hoping to appease their leader. The huge reptile broke his spear with its powerful paw strike. Rakrak froze in place in confusion as to what he should do next. Nebula received a systematic notification that two different tribes had clashed. He realized that he now had the race of humanoid lizards at his disposal and could unlock a new skill for them. Rakrak was able to fend off the strike of that huge reptile. Nebula seems to have taken full control of Rakrak's body now. The leader of the Blue Scale tribe couldn't understand how he dodged, but he realized that this couldn't happen anymore. Seeing all the characteristics of the chief, Nebula realized that Rakrak could have handled him alone. But the problem there wasn't him at all, it was the Manon monster under their control. Rakrak's combat stats now far exceeded the others. They were no longer a problem for him. The God Avatar skill gives the user an additional characteristic called Divinity. One unit of it is equal to the maximum possible strength of the creature under your control multiplied by 200. His power is now 630. Grabbing Manon by the head, Rakrak without much effort was able to bring him to the ground. This overwhelming difference in strength made absolutely everyone numb. The chief lay beneath his monster and could not understand how this could have happened. Grabbing his dagger in his hands, he rushed towards Rakrak, saying that he should not be distracted in fighting him. There are never any mistakes in his calculations, but only he himself believed that. Before he could inflict a wound, Rakrak struck his face with his sharp claws. The chieftain fell to his knees. Glancing at the rest of his wards, Rakrak asked who was next. Laying their weapons on the ground, the Blue Scale tribe bowed to him and swore allegiance. Rakrak couldn't believe it was over. The Lord was in control of his body. He was as if in a dream. The two tribes gathered at the divine altar. One of the Blue Scale tribe asked, were they really banished to the wastelands from their tribe? Then why are their scales black in color? He said that was the point. Told that through the worship of an unnamed bug god, they had changed and become stronger. If they couldn't find their god, they otherwise fell in the wastelands. He replied that the power of their god is so immense. Doesn't he really understand what happened today? Could there be a lizard with such great power? She couldn't have imagined it. Then she asked Rakrak if it would be all right. He didn't immediately understand what his friend was talking about. Jael replied that with their arrival, there were 6 times as many of them. This place is gonna run out very quickly. Suddenly, Rakrak said they'd have to get out of there. They can't just wander the wastelands in an endless search. Maybe because the answer lies somewhere in those lands? After all, God's clue was the appearance of their longtime brothers. Pointing their spears towards Manon, the boys shouted for him to calm down. His master was gone. They didn't understand why he couldn't just calm down. At that moment, Manon hit one of them with his tail. All their efforts were in vain. It seemed to them that at this rate he would break free and run away. One of the lizards asked, did Manon really want to be punished? Suddenly someone put a hand on his shoulder, but as soon as the monster saw him, it immediately roared. As he came closer, he held out some earthy root to Manon and offered him something to eat. Smelling what was in Rakrak's hand, Manon cautiously began to eat. Stroking his muzzle, the boy asked if he wanted more. But he'd have to be quieter for that. After giving him some more food, Rakrak said that the god must have a plan for him if he was still alive. Seeing that the beast was asking for more food, Rakrak said no. If Manon wanted to be on his side, he should learn patience. He told the boys that if Manon got cranky again, have them notify him. Examining the dagger in his hands, Rakrak asked if he could do something like that. The lizard replied that you could say that, and if it weren't for that guy's stubbornness, he would have been crafting much better weapons long ago. Rakrak immediately asked what this had to do with each other. He replied that it was all about the trees. They used a lot of wood while making weapons, The chief asked if it was for campfires. They burn wood to get a special hot material out of it. Rak replied that he understood, would definitely think about his idea and make a decision tomorrow. At that moment, an armless lizard came up to him and said that he had heard Rak was looking for someone to accompany him into the wastelands. The chief replied that he thought he was the traveler. The lizard replied that yes, he was a simple body wandering around looking for shelter. As he wandered, he learned to find his way. About the lands that will free them from starvation, the guy has a couple in mind. He can't say for sure if other wanderers haven't already occupied them. Rak asked the other wanderers, so those places could have been found by someone else already? It's basically fine if they go up against them. They just need to defeat them and take the lands for themselves. The lizard replied that if the boys were determined enough. Rak asked what about himself, how could he earn his trust? Pointing his finger to the sky, he replied that his answer would be there. It's not just the sky. The chief asked if it was the stars. The lizard replied that it was. At some point Rak realized that they were moving. The boy replied that that was right, they were in some kind of motion. He told me that he had found his own rules. If you know which way the stars go, you can find your way anywhere. Now he would tell about them, and if after observation everything came together, the lizard would earn his trust? The chief replied that of course. After a long story, he said they would see each other at the same time in the same place. Seeing you're behind him, Rak asked him had something happened, or had Manon given him trouble again? The lizard said no. He was a little unhappy, but as soon as he got his food on time, he became much gentler. Ur mentioned what Jail had said. They'd have to find a way to navigate the wasteland without risking starvation. He began to tell that today, when Rak was able to appease Manon, who was enjoying the food, he suddenly got an idea. Maybe it's fashionable to do that not only with him but with other animals as well? Rak didn't immediately understand what Ur was talking about. At that moment he pointed at a herd of bulls. The system notified that Rak Flame had opened a new skill of cattle breeding. It is said that at a certain point, human history had two branches. Some started crop farming, while others devoted themselves to cattle breeding. Nebula realized that this was even to be mentioned in the game itself, however. Crop production is more stable. It is not for nothing that most civilizations start their development near large bodies of water. However, the tribe he chose is made up of humanoid lizards. They are physically strong and adaptable to their environment. It is cattle breeding that they need the most strength. Plus, this tribe has developed a knowledge that will elevate them, which is or processing. They have finally learned how to give the metal the shape they want. Of course, it is still much softer than good bronze products. But for the Rak tribe, who had to fight with stone tools, this is already a big step forward. They received another rather unexpected gift. Their knowledge so far can be called astronomy with a big stretch. But in the distant future, Nebula hopes they can use them properly. Looking up at the clear sky, Rak realized that just as the Wanderer had said, the stars guided the heavens. So now all he has to do is put the plan into action. Gathering all the people of the valley at the altar, Ran said that he had an important announcement to make. The chief said that it had been a long time since the god had brought them to these lands. They even got to meet their brothers. And they could have abandoned them just as they had once abandoned them. They could have chosen a solitary life, and then they could have lived further on this earth. And those they would leave behind would perish among the vast wastelands. But that would be wrong. What God was doing was salvation, not rejection. Because that would be their greatest good. Rak told everyone that they would leave this land at dawn. Then he asked the traveler to come to him. He told me that this lizard had spent several days initiating him into the mysteries of star chart travel. Rak has personally verified that he speaks the truth. The traveler will lead them forward. They'll trust him to guide them on their way, and let everyone know so he can tell the others where they're going. The traveler began to tell that when the morning sun rises, they will go to the right of the place where it rises. For 10 days they will go forward. Then, turning right along the rotten river, they will walk for 15 more moons, and 3 more days along the mountain rift. After this journey, they will reach the goal, the endless forest. There will be many wild animals and tribes of other creatures there. Rak added that it meant the place was perfect for them. Thanking the Wanderer, Rak said he could go. The lizard replied that it was nothing. Rak asked him why they had not eaten any of the buffalo they had caught yesterday. Ur replied that they just weren't that hungry. Rak asked, and what of it? Everyone worked so gloriously hard to catch every buffalo, but the prey never became food. Ur replied that he agreed. Everyone had worked hard, but he hadn't eaten anything because he wasn't really hungry. If he put up with it now, he could eat later when he acted hungry, and he decided so. Rak shouted that he had done well. Ur wanted to eat the buffalo now, but held back for the sake of his future. Isn't it? Will the lizard continue in the same vein? Ur said yes, definitely. Until he's completely starved, he'll follow that rule. Rak said that's fine. Thinks the chief should reward him for it. It was an iron-tipped spear. As soon as the lizard took the spear in his hands, Rak said that the others who had listened to Ur's committing, they were worthy of such a spear as well. As she watched, Jael thought she wondered what his plan was. Now she seemed to understand. Taking one of the buffalo skulls, the chief ordered everyone to approach it one at a time. Calling them true warriors, he said, let God's help be with each one. Their journey will only be successful if they are patient and maintain the same restraint they have shown. Putting a buffalo skull on the Ur lizard, Rak said his name would now be Bone Warrior. They all gathered in columns. Rak said it was time to leave this divine place. But let everyone remember, God's will is with them. That is why they are not bound to any place. Rak shouted for absolutely everyone to let the nameless bug god into their head. The chief can't promise it will be easy, but he invites them to go forward fearlessly. Just as they dealt with the urge to eat buffalo, they will deal with this road as well. It's for their own good. Let everyone gather all their will in their fist and go. The unnamed bug god will always be with them. Rak has arbitrarily expressed the will of God. He asks to be presented with a gift of forgiveness for such an act. Nebula replied that there was no need to apologize. If he had done otherwise, he would not have been chosen as his priest. Since he had reached the height of his allies, things had been going very well. Plus, those very special skills of Rak finally showed themselves. He is doing a great job and meeting all of Nebula's expectations. Rak has made a new beginning. They set out on the road. The journey was hard for them, for they had all refused food and were walking under the scorching sun. Manon was the first to give up with a pitiful groan. He collapsed to the ground in exhaustion. As he approached him, Rak said it was too early to fall. The traveler replied that he seemed tired. The chief asked if they had time to rest. The traveler replied that there was no other choice. Rak ordered everyone to stop, saying that it was time to take a break. If they reached the end of the mountain ranges, would they find what they were looking for? There was only the unknown ahead. It would be worth a break. They had been walking at a steady pace for more than 3 days. He realized that the group was tired and running out of food. Rak realized that he could only hope for a miracle from God. Suddenly, one of the lizards told the chief about the appearance of another tribe that was coming at them. Org shouted that it's great. Now there's definitely no one blocking their way. They must get away from there as fast as possible. Nothing could be worse than that monster. When Rak saw them, he said they were really crazy. Maybe they're just fools, though. Upon seeing the leader, the org immediately threw their weapons out of their hands, kneeled down, and begged his forgiveness. They told me that there seemed to be a misunderstanding, because they just wanted to get out of this canyon as soon as possible. The orgs were in a hurry, for they had fled their homes. Thinking of their relatives poisoned in the wastelands, they just wanted to eat. Looking at them, Rak asked why they were running then. What had happened in the wastelands? Org asked if they had seen that hill, and then pointed with his hand. He said that they used to live there. The land here is hardly fertile, but they had enough until the monster appeared. Observing what was happening, Nebula asked the monster? It must be a deadly abomination. It was an ancient scolopendra. The description of the lost world says that they were created by the missing gods of the past. But even after the hosts disappeared, this huge abomination remained on the ground. As it turned out, this abomination's special skill was its poisonous fangs. Nebula realized that it was too strong an opponent for them for now, after which he continued to watch. The lizards realized that the ground beneath them began to shake. Org replied that it was just a monster roaring. The lizards looked at Rak and asked what they would do next. The chief asked the traveler how long it would take to go around the mountain. He replied that if you went around the mountain, it would take about 8 days. Nebula understood Rak's hesitation, but he too could be understood in such a situation. He doesn't know what he should do. Now all his tribesmen are scared. Going around is a very wise decision, But what will the chief do? Jael went to the chief and said they should fight. They have the advantage now. She told the chief that their artisan was using a method that accelerated the melting of metals. Does Rakrak remember how he does it? The chief replied that he used a special tool. Jael said exactly what it is. It's called the air mech method. It requires less effort than all the other methods. Rakrak said, what does that mean? If they use it too, they can get more power with less effort. However, the artisan experimented for a long time before creating such a thing. Jael replied that they didn't need anything special. A simple instrument would do. The first thing that came to Jael's mind to get rid of the abomination was to prop up the rocks with sticks and drop them on the monster. With their combined efforts, they pushed rocks to destroy the monster below. Nebula said that rolling over rocks to crush the Scolopendra is a simple but good idea. But he believes that to kill such a centipede you have to drop all the rocks at once. He didn't know if it was possible to accomplish this. Jael ordered everyone to push faster. The stone began to fall sharply. Jael asked, did it really work? Looking down, hoping they had made it, they were in for a huge upset. The lizards realized that the rocks did not harm the Scolopendra in any way, but only made it angry. They saw it rising rapidly toward them and decided to dump the rest of the rocks faster. Nebula realized it was too late. He decided to reincarnate into Rakrak's body. The lizard grabbed one of the rocks, trying to throw it down directly at the Scolopendra. Rakrak shouted for them to move rocks, they just need to help him out a little. The chief realized that this monster was unlikely to stand still, so he grabbed his spear and jumped off the cliff. He hurled his spear straight at the Scolopendra, piercing its body. The rocks continued to fall right on top of her, doing massive damage. Rakrak was the first to land on the ground, followed by the body of a Scolopendra falling right in front of him. Nebula said it was very good, for the hunt was a success. He realized that his faith in him was growing, but he got something more important than that. It was a new subject. Nebula wanted to kill the abomination just for that, the essence of abomination. Every god has resources. Though they can be obtained through faith, special items are used to create a whole new thing. With this essence, O will be able to summon the essence. It is a faith generator that spreads the word about God. In addition, an entity can evolve. If developed enough, it can gain a class like Apostle or Avatar. Nebula wondered, was creating an entity there the same as in the game? Then what should he create? Jael wondered if it was possible to eat the meat of this beast. She broke one leg and decided to try it. After tasting it, she said it smelled a little stinky, but it was edible. It doesn't taste too bad. However, it would be difficult to eat it like that. Thinking about it, she decided that she could dilute the flavor with something else. Add the edible part of the woody vine and cook the meat on the fire. Then there is a chance of overpowering that bad smell. The leaves will add flavor. Rakrak tasted it and froze. His taste buds sensed something new. He said that the meat became soft and quite tasty. Jael replied that she had tried to cook it. She just added edible greens and fried it up, and this is what came out. Rakrak said the smell was so bad he was about to throw all the meat away. Cooking is a good skill. Could Jael teach him that skill? She replied that of course. Jael remembered that the leader of the orc tribe had an heir of his own, and thinks Rakrak will need an heir soon too. He's getting old after all. It is very necessary for stability in the tribe. Let him think about it. Did she seriously think he needed to find a partner? Jael replied that if he doesn't see anyone else in that role yet. Rakrak wondered if Jael was right. It was worth doing something about it. Suddenly he noticed something behind Jael in the pile of rocks glinting. It looked like it was inside the rock on the monster's back. Yor tasted it and said it was not edible. The traveler replied that it was metal, namely gold. Jael had seen it before, as the artisan had shown her different types of metals. If cleaned well, it will reflect light perfectly and shine beautifully. And they say gold doesn't change color or rot over time. She believes this is the reason it is valued more than other metals. Yor said it's pretty soft, but it's heavy, and it's not good for food. The traveler asked if he wanted to hunt deer then. This meat is sweet and very tasty. The orcs told the wanderer where he could hunt deer. Joyful Yor asked the chief if he would go with them. He said they could go on their own for the time being. He wondered why this metal didn't rot. What's wrong with it? Everything dies, decays, and disappears. Nothing in this world stays the same. Not this gold plaque, though. Whoever made it was trying to keep something on it. Jael came in to notify the chief. She said that the tribe was ready for bed. Rakrak said he hadn't told anyone where he was going. Good thing she always manages to find him. Jael replied that it wasn't hard. He was the only lizard wearing a fur cape. Rakrak said she was the one who told him to wear it. She did, for he is a chief, and so she wanted to make him special. She believes a tribal leader should have a symbol of sorts. Darkness fell, and Rakrak still pondered. Life goes hand in hand with death. This metal, too, would vaporize someday. Suddenly, before his eyes, the fireflies lined up in a strange pattern, as if they wanted to communicate something to him. Rakrak didn't realize what was happening. Was this an illusion or his fantasy? Their movements remind him of the markings from this stone tablet. Looks like the chief realized something. It's not just gold that doesn't rust. It's what it shows that matters. He decided to share this with Jail. She asked the chief if there were any problems. Rakrak replied that it was fine. He had something he wanted to show her. Drawing the first symbol, Jail asked, "Is it kind of like him?" The chief said it was a male lizard. Jail asked him to explain it to her. He drew a second symbol and said it was her. "So is it a woman or is it a female lizard?" Rakrak replied that it was correct. The chief drew an equal sign in the middle. Jail immediately asked what it meant. He said that means they become partners. And that's his response to her proposal. "Looks like our favorite lizard has finally found his life partner." The system notified Nebel that the Rakrak tribe had invented writing. "That's great news," he said. "It will of course take several generations to create a sustainable written language. But he's happy that it happened almost at the very beginning of the game. Now it's time to enjoy the festival." At first glance, it may seem like a simple hunt, but competing to get the biggest game for their partner is the humanoid lizard's way of celebrating a wedding, and they both seem to have done an excellent job. Is that a coincidence or not? Rakrak himself is likely shocked by Jail's abilities. Rakrak said they would have to face this monster sooner or later anyway, and that's why he thinks the orcs can continue to live here as they used to. The orc chieftain thanked Rakrak. This is great news for his people. The orc introduced them to his son. He said he was the future leader of the tribe. They are more familiar with the area and their son can lead further. They used to live in the forests until they were driven out by huge beasts and other tribes. But thanks to them, they were able to restore their way of life. The orcs will never forget their kindness. On their way, they noticed huge footprints of some strange creatures. Rakrak asked the wanderer if the footprints were familiar to him. He said that yes, he knew who it was. These are frog tracks. They move on two legs, humanoid frogs. There are both peaceful and warlike species among them. They speak and think as they do. The chief said that since the frogs were out scouting, they were at war with someone right now. And the footprints show that there was not one, but probably 5 members of their species. He thinks the frogs outnumber them, and thinks they should all go back to their temporary camp. Rakrak ordered the tents to be pitched farther out. Let them take up as much space as possible. The others were at a loss as to why this was necessary. Jail said the other tribes, bigger than them, she feels more scouts should be sent to the borders. The chief confirmed that they would do so, but have him make sure everyone gets an equal share of the work. With so much light, the other tribes would definitely be watching them. A few days later, they changed locations. Fortunately, the collision with the frogs never happened. In such a short period of time, they had well consolidated the security of the tribe. Nebula questions whether there are any players at the moment who have been able to make the same progress. Cattle ranching is progressing quite nicely, and the tribe has adapted the house to the new environment. It's amazing how quickly they were able to spread literacy within the tribe. The symbols on the stone were visible to all the lizards, and a simple map was carved with the designation of hunting grounds. Rakrak also began recording the amount each lizard had harvested. It made them realize that they had to work harder to collect more. Their productivity increased many times over. Locust swarms in the center of the continent are gradually increasing, and insect numbers have generally increased in the north. The insect race had reached level 4. If there were other players around him, Nebula wouldn't have been able to dream of such a thing. But since he was summoned from the eastern lands, maybe it's time to take another advantage out of the circumstances. Both Rakrak's abilities and the tribe's development had already reached average. This is only the beginning. Further ahead, they will face dangers they have not yet encountered. Suddenly, someone from the guard shouted to the chief that they were in big trouble. A tribe of humanoid frogs is heading straight for them. They won't get away in time. The boys decided to meet them themselves. So that's what they are, Rakrak thought. He noticed a lizard among them. Or maybe they wanted to negotiate. The commander of the frogs decided to introduce himself. His name is Shunin. He is the son of the great chief Ulroy. They can relax, they're not going to attack them. Rak also introduced himself. He said he was the chief of this tribe and also did not wish to fight them. He asked why they had decided to honor them with such a visit. Shunan replied that they had come to report that a tribe of lizards had settled in their territory. However, the Rak do not think that all this land belongs to them. They did not see any marking of their boundaries. The chief admits that they didn't even bother to look for them, and he apologizes for this misunderstanding. But he also asks for understanding that such rules are different from those in their homeland, which is in very distant lands. Can they let them stay here while they find a better place? It seemed to Rak that Shunan was the most worthy one here, and so he decided that he could make such a request of him. Shunan replied that he was right. With his authority as the future leader, it was quite feasible. Rak assumed that the chieftain had sent them to take a closer look at them. Of course, he still had a lot of questions for them. You have to be careful and unobtrusively find out as much as possible. He offered to walk to the village where they could accept their hospitality with full heart. Since their tribes had agreed to peace, they should celebrate immediately. Xiaonan smiled and said he didn't think it was the best idea. Thanking him for the invitation, he said he couldn't accept it. Their tribes were not yet so familiar. Rak replied that he could not simply let go of those to whom their people were indebted, and suggested we celebrate it right here. Xiaonan replied that it was probably okay to do that. Now, Rak must understand the relationship between that lizard and the frogs, and why they came to them really. But you can't show them that he's interested. If they realize what he's thinking, they'll try to use it against them. Rak decided to ask Xiaonan what were those big feathers around his neck. He replied that they were the feathers of cockatrices. They are dangerous animals that live around this forest. Huge birds standing on two legs. Looks like Rak hasn't met them yet. Not only are they big, but they are also poisonous and very difficult to catch. In addition to their speed, they are known for their agility. They are the reason they have to keep an eye on the area. Rak asked, since they are so hard to catch, does that mean they attack them from a distance with a spear throw? Shunan was surprised to hear this. Since he doesn't know what spears are, he decided to show off his weapons. He shouted to his servants to bring him a bow and arrow. Since everyone was busy, Shunan ordered that Owen bring him arrows and a bow. Also asked him to hang a target on a tree so he could practice shooting. Shunan hit the target accurately the first time. Rak marveled at his skill. Shunan told them that they had been learning to shoot since they were children. He didn't want to brag, but he was considered one of the best archers in the tribe. Rak asked if he could try this bow. He replied that of course he could. It may seem difficult the first time. The stick and thread are very strong. The damage and area of effect is less than a spear, but you can carry a lot of arrows. In addition, arrows fly more accurately than spears, and you can shoot them more often. He would have liked to delve much more deeply into the study of this skill. Xiaonan said that nothing comes out perfect the first time. He also ordered Owen to pick up the arrows. Rak was surprised. After all, he was the one doing the shooting, so he should have collected them himself. Xiaonan said he should consider it a gesture of goodwill. There's something more important than shooting that he needs to learn. Collecting arrows, Rak asked Owen, how did the lizard end up among the humanoid frogs? He panicked a bit and replied that they lived together in the same tribe. The chief asked why lizards and frogs were together. He said that the two races could help each other. Smiling, Owen wished that they too would continue to live in harmony. Frogs can't leave the water for long, and lizards are good at picking fruit and climbing trees. Rak thinks sharing food with them for protection isn't a bad idea, but they can fend for themselves. Owen said the forest is a dangerous place and the Ulroy tribe is the largest in the entire forest. Without them, he wouldn't have made it to this point and wouldn't be socializing with him now. Rak told him to forget his words. Let him pretend he was just asking him about how to shoot a bow properly. Xiaonan was already used to the taste of venison, but the addition of greens made this meat even tastier. Rak asked if he had tasted buffalo meat. The frog replied that yes, it had been a long time since they had caught them, but he remembered that their meat was delicious. The chief said they keep live buffalo in their possession. If Xiaonan wants, they could trade one of those for a couple bows. He wished he could, but they could discuss it when they knew each other better. Fortunately, the other members of their tribe got along well with the lizards. Not only Owen was able to fit into their society, but so were the frogs. It was good that both races existed in their tribe. He asked Owen if he could tell him how they had been helping each other with tribal affairs for the past few months. Owen said of course. He would be glad to tell of the friendship of their peoples. Rak thought so. Shaunen had brought it all up like that, as if they had talked it over beforehand. If he hadn't talked to Owen before, he might have fallen for it. Rak said he was glad to know them, and he offered to go to them himself next time, rather than trouble them with such a long trek here. Shunen replied that he didn't need to. This place is perfect for such meetings. Rak noticed something was wrong. This didn't seem like a relationship of equal species. Owen gets a slap on the wrist from Shaunen. Looks like he suspected something. Shaunen asked what the man had said to the lizard chief. Owen replied that he hadn't told him anything. Rak asked him how to shoot a bow properly, and he just gave him a few tips. Rock Frog said it was just an excuse. Owen can't even shoot a bow himself. The lizard replied that he told him what he knew how to do to ward off suspicion. And then Owen pretended he couldn't tell him everything he knew. And to teach him archery, he has to give Shaunen something in return. And what did the chief answer? Asked the frog. Owen replied that he had given up on the idea. He said he was sorry he had nothing to offer him. Schoonen says he didn't expect anything else from him. Frog knows Owen is a trickster. He asked if Owen remembered what was on that island. He was very lucky. Shunen wanted to offer these lizard children as a sacrifice, but the new victims found them themselves. Owen said the frog was right, he was very lucky, and he would try to outsmart them. If Owen had known it would turn out this way, he wouldn't have even tried to get here. He should have guessed everything when the frogs welcomed them so happily, or when they brought them to the fraternity ceremony. Or at least when they told them to pack up and come to this island. The remaining 200 lizards could do nothing against the 1,550,000 frogs. Plus, they have God on their side. It's a two-headed monster who commands frogs exactly as they command them. It seems that will never change. You can't escape the inevitable. The leader of the lizard tribe with black scales looks like a strong warrior. And despite the tribe's 600 members, they're just simple savages who didn't even know bows and arrows existed. If he donates them to the frog god, he can live a lot longer. Let his son be patient a little longer. His father will soon convince these lizards to come to them and save him, whatever it takes. The tribe of frogs and lizards decided to make an exchange. Shunen was glad to see a real live buffalo. Rak, on the other hand, said they have them and thinks it's not a bad trade. Owen told Shunen that there was no need to rush. They should get to know each other better before exchanging resources. Besides, they don't know anything about their tribe yet. Wouldn't it be better to visit them first? Then they can give them a bow. Wouldn't that be a good opportunity to get to know each other better? Rak decided he didn't need to go to them yet. His tribe was able to recreate his bow and arrow. He asked Jael how it had worked out this time. She said that the arrow only reached half of the maximum distance. Rak said he didn't even aim. Apparently that's the limit. They replicated the look perfectly, but not the bowstring. Jael said their 5th meeting is coming up. They seem very eager to learn as much as they can about them. The chief thinks they're obviously hiding something behind this simple trust. Maybe they're trying to pull some kind of dirty scheme. The problem is that they still don't know their plans, so you have to stay on guard. It was time for him to accomplish something at this meeting. Rak asked if they had gathered all the herbs. Jael replied that everything was gathered. The herbalist found out where they grew. The chief thinks it would be good if Owen was the solution to their problem. Jael asked why not give it a try. It's okay to give this guy a chance. Meanwhile, Owen was getting another round of abuse from his boss. Shunen ordered the big guy, oh boy, to leave him alone or he might die like that. Owen said that these lizards are from the Black Scale tribe. They are more cautious than he thought. Obo thinks they're nothing like them, jumping into a trap without thinking of the consequences. Shaunen said Owen needed to hurry. Father said to arrange a sacrifice ceremony for him as early as possible. Have him find out more information about them. They must get the chief of the tribe and all his warriors there as early as possible. Owen realized that only the frogs knew that. We have to listen to him carefully. Shunen said that the illness of the father and elders is only getting worse. It cannot be put off. Owen asked, does that mean that if they are sick, they are infected with scabies disease? Is it really that dangerous? Shaunen thinks the lizard men shouldn't know about it, but will tell him nonetheless. Scabies is a dangerous disease. If you get sick with this stuff, you'll not only start itching, but you'll be covered in white sticky mucus. No matter how much he washes it off, it never comes off. And over time, the mucus covers most of his body. When there's too much of it, you get breathing problems. And the next stage is death. This is the first time Owen has heard that scabies can be fatal. Strange that he could tell it to him. He should probably be neither happy nor surprised. The lizards must not find out about this. Otherwise, there will be individuals among them who will mock the frogs for it. Xiaonan said he did, but they wouldn't be able to hide it forever. Owen thinks it's okay to tell the lizard tribe that they can get it too. Skunin said that's a good idea, but because scabies doesn't apply to them. There's an herb in the woods that produces white sap when you break it, and even one that can cause scabies. Owen comes in contact with frogs most often, and he can tell he contracted the infection from them. Xiaonan thought so. This one could be brought to life by Owen's trickster. If he can convince the lizards to come to them, his family will be forever free from the fate of victims. Owen thanked him for that. He almost peed his pants when he heard that. Xiaonan said they would need a huge sacrifice this time. Let him try very hard to bring them. Owen thinks they'll have to give them a couple bows to negotiate after all. The Rak tribe brought an herb with which to treat scabies. The chief asked if even that wasn't enough to trade for a bow. Owen wondered if they had gathered all the grass in the area. Shunan replied that no, but it wasn't a matter of quantity. It's just that exchanging weapons requires a certain amount of trust between tribes. Rak said to build trust between their tribes, he wants Shunan to fulfill his one request. He would like to have a one-on-one conversation with Owen. Xiaonan replied that of course they could go. Owen said that before becoming part of the tribe, their gray-brown lizards underwent a fraternization ceremony. Before that, they got to know the frogs better. Owen asked the chief to tell about himself. He, in turn, will also try to be as open to it as possible. Thinks they should suspend disbelief and take a step towards each other. Rak said he was right. Distrust had formed between them. It must end. The chief will tell him all about them. Xiaonan said they did a good job. They have achieved outstanding results. He asked Owen if the lizards themselves had said they would come to their village. He replied that they had. Oboy said that when they promised to show them their village, he thought it might be a trap. But that was just silly. Thanks to this, the frogs now know where their settlement is, as well as its size, and even learned the history of their disease. According to the scout, the tribe consisted of about 600 men. In fact, there were about 300 of them, but only 30 of them were warriors. Skunin didn't think they'd trust them that much. Owen had done a lot to make it happen. Let him tell him what he wants. Owen replied that he could only ask for what he had previously promised him. Xiaonan said he didn't know what it was about. The lizard reminded him that if he did everything right, he'll take his son off the victim list and let them live together. Did he really promise him that? Xiaonan said not to be so harsh. His father would understand. Let Owen not worry, he remembered his promise. The lizard thanked his boss. Now it's gonna be just like he wanted it to be. Owen will be able to live with his baby. This is the mistake of a foolish tribal leader named Rak. He should have been more vigilant. Seeing these inscriptions on the ground, he asked Rak what they were. The latter said they call them letters. He and his allies had invented them. The cross means no, which means false. Owen asked if two letters could be written side by side. The chief said of course. If you write these letters side by side, you get not false. In other words, it also means true. Rak said he never thought about it. Owen is a genius. The first thing that came to his mind was how Xiaonan had called him sly. Rak never talked about the letters in meetings. Why did he tell him about it and not the frogs? He replied that it was all about trust. It was a trust that had formed between their tribe and the frogs of Alroy. But he doesn't really care about that so much as he cares about the trust between them. He's generally between lizards and frogs. The chief said he didn't believe his words about the frogs. Surely there must be a very different meaning behind them. His tribe knows what pain is, and they know what it's like to be lost and intimidated. They are just like him, and they know suffering by sight. Those words brought tears to Owen's eyes. The chief asked if Owen thought he was wrong. He said not at all. Is there anything else he wants to say? Rak said no. He had already noticed glimmers of faith in them. He was very cocky, but he can't handle all the frogs and their faith. Even bragged about catching a monster. It's useless for those who have already seen real monsters. They didn't even know how to use a bow, much less the secret weapon of the frog warriors. Took telling him about the letters out of the blue was a pretty stupid decision. He thinks Rak shouldn't have trusted him so much. But why the hell did he believe him? since he's a simple trickster and deceiver. The next morning, the Black Scale tribe arrived at the frog village. Xiaonan welcomed his guests with open arms. Rakrak thanked and said he hoped today's meeting would deepen their tribe's relationship. Let them not worry that they came with weapons. They were just worried they'd meet cockatrice on the way. What idiots, Xiaonan thought. They can't beat cockatrice with those sticks and tips. When the feast starts, they'll get them drunk and shoot them with poisoned arrows. Rakrak asked where Owen was. Xiaonan replied that he was preparing for the banquet. Looks like he's drawing something on the floor, probably deciding where to put them all. Xiaonan told them to go through there and say hello to him while he checked to see if the food was ready. After saying hello, Owen said he was marking their seats with letters. When they were seated, the feast would begin. This feast will initiate peace and friendship between their tribes. It's worth noticing the sign he's drawing. Putting on the mask, Rakrak told Yor they were starting. Let them destroy all the frogs. After surveying the area, the chief said it looked like they had killed everyone. Yor reported that while they were attacking the warriors, many frogs escaped. Along with them was Shunin, so they would soon face the arrows. He thinks everything is going according to plan, but they could use the arrows. After thinking for a moment, Rakrak told Owen that he had a small favor to ask of him. Xiaonan didn't understand how things had turned out this way. Had that damn Owen betrayed them? He ordered all the warriors of the village to raise their weapons and attack the lizards. Let their lizards stay in the village until the warriors get there. We must attack the enemy lines until reinforcements arrive. Have them attack when ready. Their arrowheads are soaked in poisonous frog venom. If they only touch it, they will experience terrible agony. Squad leader Yor ordered the troops to hide behind the metal plates. The frogs were certainly not prepared for this. They couldn't believe their eyes. The lizards had beaten back all their arrows. These plates could withstand spears, much less arrows. Yor said it was a good thing. Xiaonan said he didn't care. Let them keep shooting. We can't let them go any further. Suddenly he saw thick smoke in front of his eyes. Now you can't see them at all. That smoke will make their shots less accurate. Where did it come from? It was Owen who decided to set fire to the village. His friends asked him why he was doing it. Are they going to use these batons instead of weapons? Lizard replied that they were given them on Shunan's orders. And it can't be that Shunan ordered them to burn down the village. It was a lizard from the Black Scale tribe who asked him for a favor. Let them trust him, they'll beat the frogs. They can do the same with their sticks. But how are they going to do it? And how can they trust him? He's a liar. Owen replied that that's why they should believe him. Because he's a trickster Owen. After all, even he had risked everything he had. There was no turning back. Shunan was horrified to see his village ablaze with fire. The lizards from the village had betrayed them too. The advantage is now on the enemy's side. They must retreat immediately. The servant said they would kill their warriors. If he, as the direct heir to the chief, gets into danger, the whole tribe is finished. He does not doubt Oboi's fighting skills. However, there is a more reliable and effective way to get rid of these lizards. The commander asked, "Is Mr. Shunan fighting in the lower part of the village?" The attendant said that was correct. There was a squad of warriors near the welcome feast site. They had sent 5 more to check what was going on. Apparently they're all dead by now. That leaves 15 Shunan warriors, and 4 or 5 on the island. 10 more with him, and together with the warriors of the upper village, there were 45 in all. The numerical advantage is still on their side. Have the warriors coat their arrows with poison. When Mr. Shunan arrives, they will immediately go into battle. Commander Oboi sensed someone approaching. Have them prepare to fire. He didn't understand where the feeling of excitement came from. A feeling just like when he'd met cockatrice. His instincts told him there was danger ahead. When they see the shadow, they start shooting at him. It is a huge Manon controlled by Jael and her mate. It has grown even stronger in these lands. A comrade asked, "Doesn't Manon get hit by arrows?" She replied that he just eats them. He always eats anything that flies near his mouth. He's been angry and violent lately. Let him watch carefully. There's a feast for him. After thinking for a moment, Oboi decided that maybe he should shoot him in the eye. This monster is no match for cockatrice. It's much faster and it can't aim for the eyes. So to poison it, they have to get the poison in its mouth. The commander ordered everyone to throw their frogs into its mouth. The beast has no defense against poison. It will eat anything they throw at it. The boys didn't understand why they were throwing their frogs from their bags into Manon's mouth. In some strange way, why are they giving up their guns? Jael said that if they wanted to poison Manon, they should have known that the scheme was a failure from the start. The system notified that the black scale lizards had received a blessing. The first was strong skin, the second was great strength, and the third was resistance to poisoning. Meanwhile, one of the warriors almost shot the chief. Yer managed to deflect the arrow with his spear. The commander thinks it was the last warrior. Shunin must have abandoned his tribe and fled. The gray-brown lizards started attacking the frogs. So that's it. It worked out pretty well. Rakrak says they have no right to condemn them for it. There's only one thing he doesn't understand. Despite all the tribe's problems, their great chief, Alroy, never showed up. Watching them closely, Nebula said that it was already because of him. The disease called ACO 023731 has a fungal appearance. It infects the mucous membranes of amphibians. It is extremely contagious with a long incubation period. It was quite difficult for Nebel to find it. Importantly, it infects the mucous membranes of amphibians and is deadly. This was around the time that Rakrak decided to leave the Holy Land. Hundreds of kilometers away, he found the disease and was able to bring it to a remote lake. Thanks to countless wasps and other insects, it worked out just right. And then Alroy, the strong chief of the humanoid frog tribe, suddenly disappeared. Even attempting sacrifices for healing did not help him in any way. He asked their two-headed god to accept his offering and show these lizards the power of his god. At that time, Shunin and his men had just arrived. He was surprised that his father had already started the ritual, and that they would win. Rakrak saw Owen and said he did a great job. But what's the rush? He replied that they should go to an island in the middle of the lake. The lizard children are there, the frogs are going to sacrifice them. The god could not heal the lizards, however. He will try to attack Rakrak's tribe. His warriors may not have the strength to win. The chief said he should have told him about it sooner. They had already left in the boats, they would not get to the island. Owen suggested swimming, they could. Rakrak said it was too dangerous. When they get to shore, they're defenseless against the bows, and they can start shooting even when they're in the water. Owen got on his knees and started begging, because his son was there. He's to be sacrificed. Rakrak got angry and slapped him. He should have said so a long time ago. Why didn't Owen trust him sooner? The chief doesn't believe in the god of those damn frogs. He is confident that they will defeat him with their strength. Even if this god were to come out at him right now, he would show the strength to defeat him. But for the good of his own child, why didn't Aun say so sooner? It would have made all the difference if Rakrak had known of Shunin's intentions a little earlier. The two-headed Lord of Frogs has appeared. Chief Alroy praises his god. Let him accept his offering. They dare to disturb the lake of the Lord. Let him punish these black lizards. Punish them all with his might. Rakrak thought it was too late, he was too late, but maybe it's still worth a try. They won't have an advantage this time, so no amount of subterfuge will help. And there may be casualties in their ranks. It looks like there are no other options. Suddenly, the very butterfly nebula flew by Rakrak's side. The chief asked Owen if he believed in miracles. Shunin was surprised at the reaction of the two-headed god. He usually accepted their offerings with delight. Something darkened abruptly. Looking back, he saw a huge praying mantis. Looks like it was Nebula who recreated it. A minor race of level 4, minimal divinity and faith, and also the essence of abomination. When all these conditions were met, he succeeded in creating this creature. At this point, you will probably find very few players who have made the same progress. And a great battle began between the two-headed god and the mantis. The frogs escaped as best they could. Chief Alroy almost died in the scuffle, but he still believes his god can win. Mantis said he was just a water serpent who had put on the guise of a deity. He should have realized by now how insignificant he is. The mantis will present him to his maker and help you atone for your guilt, the guilt of his sinful folly. He will atone for his sins with flesh and blood. The two-headed monster, a level 4 serpent and a level 3 Hyungsun, a mantis named Streetus, now a level 11 creature. His skill is great strength. The Rakrak tribe had won the victory. Everyone was ecstatic at what they had seen. Owen sobbed with happiness. Nebula was surprised that this monster looked quite strong, but it was still far from his creature. The skill, tremendous strength, randomly assigned to Stratus is pretty good. but he's sure a weak enemy hasn't unlocked its full potential. The system notified him that he killed the two-headed monster, and he gets the essence of the evil spirit and a new habitat. Looks like he got very lucky. A habitat called seawater was discovered. That's why the two-headed serpent couldn't use its power. It's because the water in the lake is fresh. A habitat in the river would be nice, but they don't really need it now. It might come in handy someday, so we'll put it aside for now. The remaining frogs were trying to get away from the place as fast as they could. Olroy couldn't understand how this could have happened. Shunin realized that it wasn't the scabies that made his father weak. It was because of the power of the two-headed monster. He was so enchanted by her. From the moment God appeared, his father relied on him for everything. All the warriors hid behind the god, and he in turn became a coward who can't come forward. Mantistritus told the creator that his will was done. Nebula replied that good job. Now it can rest until the next time. When the time comes, he will again submit to the will of the creator. Will Rakrak stop there? After all, the frog leader Olroy is still alive. He said the frogs are on a boat headed for the upper village. Since the island is empty, they will just swim across. They will win an unqualified victory today. Is there a lizard here that could lead them to the top of the frog village? Owen replied that he would go. He needed to go to the island to see his son anyway. And he wasn't tired yet, so he could do it. One of the brown-scaled lizards asked to be allowed to help the Rakrak tribe as well. The chief replied that they were not warriors and would not be able to fight with such wounds. The lizard said that he was a warrior, and not only warriors are able to kill frogs. It may not be very honorable, but they all came here to kill frogs indiscriminately. The way their tribe was able to fight back inspired everyone to keep fighting. This fire had been growing in their hearts since the time when they first became slaves. Are they that upset? Owen replied that they were desperate because of all the friends, children, and grandchildren they've lost. They have to get revenge on those damn frogs. Rakrak raised his hand and shouted that they had every right to be angry. All those who seek revenge, let them follow him. At one meeting, Shunin told Rakrak that a little more practice and he would be on the level of their warriors. The chief replied to him that he hit right in the center of the target. Why isn't he at warrior level yet? Shunin said that this is not the main thing in shooting skill. He has both strength and accuracy, but he spends too much time shooting. The chief asked if, instead of firing indiscriminately, he should aim at the enemy's vulnerable points. Frog replied that, in a real battle, the target would move. First you need to slow down or stop the victim, and then you can finish him off. If they build friendship between the tribes, he will teach him how to make bows. All the materials are very simple. Any lizard can get them. Rakrak didn't realize what it was about the unpleasant feeling he felt then. Now all he has to do is find out in person from him. They're getting pretty close. Seeing his son named Ian, Owen hugged him tightly, for it had been so long since they had seen each other. The chief ordered Yor to send the wounded in a boat along with the children and go with them. Then have him move the gray-brown lizards to the lower part of the village to cause commotion among the enemies. Yor asked, will they attack from both sides at the same time? Rakrak replied that, after getting their attention, he would swim over with the warriors and could attack. But whether it would go well, Yor was worried. The chief said they were already fewer in number, and they had a new divine blessing. Their black scales are very hard to see in the water under the light of the moon, so that was the end of them. Chief Olroy was shocked at where they came from. They came out of nowhere. The frogs fell from the sharp spears of the lizards. Olroy cried out for the two-headed god to save him. Let him repay all the sacrifices he had made to him. Rakrak heard his prayers and threw his spear right at his head. Their god is no longer here. Shunin, in the commotion, tried to escape. There were more of them, and they had poisoned weapons. His father can no longer command warriors. The lizards are poison-resistant, so arrows are no problem. He looked back to see his father, but that was when Rakrak crept up on him. The chief said he had finally found him, and he asked if Shunin was a warrior. Rakrak will be merciful and let him fall in the death of a warrior. Let him raise his weapon. Shunin asked to be spared. What about their friendship? He holds no grudge against him at all. The two-headed monster also threatened them. Shunin will tell him the secret. He'll tell you how to make a bow. He was interested in materials, wasn't he? They make them from the tendon from their backs. The chief asked what kind of creature's tendons did they use. Shunin said of the lizards. He realized he had dug his own grave. Rakrak says he understood. They hold no grudge against each other. He has won an absolute victory, so he accepts his deal. After thinking about it, he told him to let him run if he cared so much for this life. Owen saw this and asked the chief why he let Shunin escape. The chief said it was fine, he just needed a moving target. Owen told Rak that he is much better with the bow, and the arrows fly right. The chief replied that if the bowstring was pulled a little tighter, it would tear immediately. It would be a good idea to make it stronger. Owen feels that they will not find better material under the present circumstances. The chief realizes this and thinks it is time to leave this forest. Winter is approaching, and this is the buffalo's habitat. Water buffalo move to warmer places in search of food. Did Owen go hunting today too? He replied that yes, they took care of the frogs wandering around. Now for some time there will be no problems with the supply of material for onions. Owen inquired, now his goal of a great chief is Alroy. He replied that no, Alroy was just as injured as Shaunin. He will become someone's headdress, like his son's bones on it. As Owen tracked these guys down, he discovered something else this time. Jael noticed Ian, who was eavesdropping on the chief's conversation with his father. She asked the child what he was doing here. Does he have something to say to Rak? The guy wanted to show them his figurine that looked like their keeper. Everyone gathered when they saw Ian's figurine. The chief said it was beautiful and really well made. Ian said he wanted to give it to Rak. The chief asked if he was sure. Owen said in their day making and sharing items is quite a popular practice among the village children. Jael asked if other children in the village had many of these figures. Ian replied that many had one. It is that guardian who saved them because it is a great and kind being. Rak is sorry he only has one of these. Owen suggested looking around the village for more. The chief agreed he would pay any price or he would trade it for something. But he's still interested in what Owen was talking about earlier. In the cave where they were hiding, he discovered something strange. He had never seen anything like this before. Without thinking for long, they decided to take the troops and rush over there. Owen said this is the entrance. The frogs used it as a hiding place. We need to go inside. The lizard also said that everyone inside had been killed. Isn't that suspicious? But how was it possible to engrave something so detailed on such a hard stone? Jael remembered that this sign was similar to the one on the beetle's back. Nebula watched them intently. He thinks they are ancient ruins. There are many types of ancient ruins. You can use them to gain knowledge or discover wonders. Among them are items with certain functions or ruins where you can get demonic items. However, with such a low level of civilization, even if they mastered the ancient knowledge, it wouldn't matter much. Miraculous ruins can create or alter special resources and great mysterious blessings. They are anchored in a specific location and are of less value to Rak since he is a nomad. The probability of a unique relic is very low. He hoped it wasn't the ruins of an ancient castle. There was a strange voice that asked who had come. A voice greeted the wanderer and said that this was a demonic world. They saw a huge number of staircases heading in different directions. Jael says it's deep here. They'll have to go through all these stairs. The chief thinks it would be good if they could jump down. His wife asked him if he was going to pray to their god. He replied that no, he did not want to bother their god for nothing. Suddenly they saw a large number of rats on their way. Jael said they were not rats, they were gutters. But why do they hiss so loud? And aren't they too big? They don't usually move in groups like this. They seem angry. It's the first time Owen's seen one too. The chief said they were just monster rats then. They're probably the ones guarding this place. Keep everyone on their guard. The Nutria rushed at them without a second thought. But the lizard's sharp spears left them no chance. Rak asked if they could eat them. They will gut them and take them with them. Jael thought maybe there was an option to raise them on a farm, like water buffalo. Owen said that if he wanted to do something new on the farm, how about fish? Rak asked, don't fish just appear and disappear on their own? Owen replied that they too breed and lay eggs. Even frogs knew this and prohibited fishing during the breeding season. All they will need to do is build a dam and keep them locked up while they are young. Owen will work out the details when they get back. Suddenly some of the nutria stung the lizard. The victim shouted that it was a rat still alive. He said he was going to take it to skin it. But as soon as he touched it, he felt a sharp and searing pain in his hand. Rak decided to try it himself and immediately felt something like lightning striking. Jael got worried and asked if he was okay. He replied that he was fine. The system notified that it's a devil-possessed nutria. Her ability is electricity. She can attack the enemy with electricity with a simple touch. Besides, it's the ruins of a demonic castle. Electric demons are powerful. However, if Rakrak breaks through these ancient ruins, there is a high probability that he will gain demonic power. Mastering magical abilities will not immediately make him a mage, but with each generation the powers will become more powerful. They can create the descendants of sorcerers. But there is one problem. In the Lost World, divinity and magic are in conflict. According to the setting, magic comes from ancient evil, not from God. Great magicians develop their own powers without relying on gods. If the number of such people increases, punishment will follow. It's not that there is no way to prevent it, but there are too many options. The demonic ruins would reveal their true colors and tempt them. A shining stingray appeared and asked the chief if he wished to have such power. If he so desires it, he may give it to him. Jail asked if he wasn't feeling well. They could leave and come back here later. The chief immediately agreed. He stood up and told the boys to make sure all the rats were dead. Have them check their bows, spears, and other weapons. Rakrak realized that he was the only one who could see the creature. He asked mentally what it was. Scat replied that he is the spirit that protects this place, and is only seen by those who have great power. And to what power is he speaking? Rakrak realized that he could communicate by thought, but his deepest feelings were not transmitted. After all, he had a demonic spirit in front of him now. Should he warn Rakrak? Looking at his ranking, he noticed that he had a new ability, Cunning. But when did he acquire these abilities? Did he develop them while fighting Shunin? It was a mystery to Nebulous. Scat said that the power he was talking about was electricity. To burn living things with searing flames. The ability to give off light like the sun. And he can give him all that. The chief said that if he would give it to him, he would be grateful. But the stingray replied that it was not so simple. There were certain conditions. That confused Rakrak, except that the stingray hadn't offered to give it to him, and said nothing about the terms. Scat said it was nothing. His power was enough. Rakrak replied that if he wanted to make a deal, he should have said so from the beginning. This disappointed him greatly. If the stingray wants something from him, let him show the appropriate attitude. And from now on, let him be careful. Let him at last speak his terms. What can he give him? Let him say exactly what he wants from him. If he tries to hide something, there will be no further conversation. Jail approached Rakrak and told him that everyone was ready to go. He replied that let them go, catch up with them later. Scath says he's trapped in these ruins and can't get out of this place. He wants Rakrak to go down and defeat the guardian who protects the seal. Then he will gain his freedom and grant him his great ability. Is he talking about the sparkling power of these monstrous rats? The man replied that this was not a correct description. His ability is called electricity. Right now, it can only create sparks, but the more he uses it, the more powerful it will become. With it, the chief will even be able to summon a real thunderstorm. This ability can improve and develop, and someday even become comparable to divine power. His ability is so vast that Rakrak can master it. Not just him, but another member of their tribe could use it as well. If he wants to monopolize it, he can do the ritual. The chief said it's unbelievable. But why would a creature with such power be locked up here? Scat replied that it was because his ability was too powerful. Aren't dangerous things always sealed? Since it can't be defeated, the chief asked, what's next? He had just shown how dangerous he was, after all. Rakrak thinks the stingray is hiding something from him. Maybe there are more side effects than benefits after using his ability. Let him lie to him no more. He could go and just destroy the entrance to the cave, so that no one can find these ruins. Scat stopped the chief and said he would tell him everything. Just please let him hear him out. He was one of the beings that once ruled this world. He was also descended from an ancient demon long forgotten. Neither the gods nor he could remember their origins. He was trapped here for an unknown amount of time. Abilities with unknown origins stupefy people. Since they do not know the cause of the powers, they mistakenly believe that these powers belong to them. Rakrak had already seen those whose minds were stupefied with power. Was it demonic power that was affecting them? Scat said exactly that. Besides, his abilities are randomized. Possessors are chosen at random. The chief understood it all. God's power is given to those who are chosen by his judgment. Even those who do not know how to handle power can master it. It develops over time. In the end, There are bound to be people who will defile God and rebel against him. But this ability is definitely powerful and desirable. It will be useful in battle. Is there really no way out here? Rakrak agrees, but he has conditions to him. Scath asked, what are they? First, this ability is randomly passed on, but he said it could be monopolized. Is it possible to grant it to only a select few? Scat thinks so, but why would he do that? He believes that if this gift is only given to a select few, it will be seen as God's choice. Then the creatures will cease to defy God. And of course the second condition, he must believe in their Lord too. Scat wondered, how could that be? After all, he is a demonic spirit. He is older than all their gods. Rakrak said it didn't matter. What mattered was what he would do in the future. That's just ridiculous. Gods don't like demonic spirits. The chief said not to judge their god with your prejudices. He thinks the unnamed god of bugs is generous, and all the more the stingray seems useful. Would his god accept him? The chief replied that if he agreed to the terms, of course. The demonic spirit said that it wasn't actually trapped in these ruins, but it ruled over them. Those gutters were just an attempt to break him. It was a test to see if the chief was right for him, but he's going to cheat him anyway. Isn't he angry? Rakrak says he understands, so he's forgiven. Since he's living with those monstrous rats in such a dark place, he should be more tolerant. The chief thinks to the spirit should go outside and see many beautiful places. Scat asked his name. The chief said his name was Rakrak. If the god of the leader accepts the demonic spirit, this ability will become his. The system has notified that a demonic spirit wishes to be his subordinate. If Nebula agrees, he will receive the demonic gift of electricity. Possess this spirit and join him to the Holy One. In this way, he can overcome the punishment and gain demonic ability. Well done, Rakrak. It seems their meeting was a good one for both of them. The demonic gift of electricity has been received, so the unnamed god of beetles gave Rakrak the ability and he mastered the power of thunder and lightning. This is what the story of the black lizard looks like. This is how the chosen one began. It's been 9 years since then. The man asked, but what does the unnamed god of bugs have to do with thunderstorms? The lizard decided to ask a counter-question. What color is the lightning? He answered that it was blue. The second question, what is the name of their god? He gave the answer, the blue god of insects, but he still doesn't realize it. The man said that, in this long story, they never introduced themselves. His name is Y. The lizard replied that they would have to end this conversation there. Looks like they've got uninvited guests. They're either gnolls or hyena men. They are warlike savages, a crazy race. The lizard has a question for the traveler Y. Do they look like the men from Sockate? The man replied that they were defenseless, lacked vigilance, and were poorly armed. To him, they're just wandering gnolls. The lizard said that was pretty good reasoning. That's exactly what he thinks. But does that mean they should crush them? The lizard fired his energy arrow and hit right next to one of the hyenas. Their commander shouted that it was an enemy attack. The powerful energy from the arrow struck them. Damn that lizard, they said, and began to retreat. The valiant lizard remembered to introduce himself. His name is Owen. Y couldn't believe his ears. Is this really Owen? He's talking to someone so great. The lizard said he hadn't used his power in a while and suggested we take a break and have a little talk. Y knows that this smoking pipe and tobacco like ritual paraphernalia used by select black lizards to replenish their strength. Owen said it's fine if he has questions he can ask. If Owen had such power, why follow someone? He's not talking about betrayal. Just why does such a great lizard live such a hard life wandering alone in this wilderness? There's one reason: he's full of sins. Owen once betrayed many of his people. He has been shown the path of redemption. His goal is to spread the names of the blue insect god and the chief of the Rakrak tribe through stories and writings. This path of redemption he chose for himself. Y believes that even without it, there's hardly anyone here who hasn't heard of the Black Scale tribe. No need to mention the reputation of Rakrak, the great priest and chief. Owen replied that so, if anyone attacked him, it would scare them away, that was all. The lizard asked if he was also a wanderer. Y said he was coming straight from automation. He tries to convey the words of the automation lord and heads towards the Black Scale tribe. Owen bowed and said he didn't realize he was a guest. But that was quite good. The lizard called for his transport. Y froze in place. Was it cockatrice? Owen says he's right, but only half right. It's Kokorka. specifically a mix of cockatrice and chicken. Lizard hasn't been there in a while either and was just about to visit Rak, so he'll take him. In return, he would have to listen to the story to the end. Why said he would love to. Will he tell the story of the Blue Beetle God or the Rak saga? Owen replied that a little of both. Meanwhile, the great chief was notified that an elderly stargazer said his life was on the line, and he thinks he can't talk to the tribal chief anymore. Rak told Commander Yor to leave the procession. Have them prepare to stay here tonight. Yor shouted at the top of his voice to stop. It was an order from the chief. Jael asked if there was a problem. The chief told her to tell the stargazer that he would be arriving soon, and tell him to make sure he lives to see it. He was always good at predicting the future. Let him take care of the funeral. It will be a sad night. On arriving at the cabin, the doctor notified the chief that she had done all that was in her power, but that he had not much time left. The old man said that a lot had happened both here and there. He had traveled to many places and lands and had learned a lot. He lost an arm and was banished, but most importantly, he met a tribal leader and taught many people to contemplate the sky. If you're a lizard, one day there will come a time when overwhelming fatigue and exhaustion sets in. The only way to cure this affliction is to sleep forever. He decided to be a little extravagant before his last journey and steal time from the busiest personality of this tribe. Isn't time more valuable than anything else? The chief smiled and said that the old man was still joking. He has a question that no one but he is capable of answering. When they die, what really happens to them? He is the first chosen. This is a question for him, the priest, the closest to God. What awaits them after death? They say that when they die, they fall into eternal sleep. Does he think they'll have nightmares forever? Does the great leader believe this? Rak replied that he didn't know why the old man thought he could answer that question. That's because the blue insect god saved them when they got lost. So he hopes that he will continue to guide them even after they leave the world of the living. Such is his faith. Does he think it is different from God's will? The chief replied that no, the stargazer is right. The blue god of insects guides them whenever they get lost. He will surely not leave them even after death. Rak thinks so? What kind of place will it be? Will they begin by standing face to face with God and exchanging awkward greetings? He thinks it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe there would be a huge field where they could run around as much as they wanted. A space where a slight crunch would rejoice with every step, and the tip of his tail would touch the soft meadow grass. There will also be a big boulder to lie down and rest on. The weather will always be nice. Although maybe not, it would be boring if it was always the same. So it'll be cloudy and rainy at times. And of course, there's a beautiful river. Stargazer said he wished he had a house he could rest in. Not a tent that gives the impression of moving again soon, but a solid home where he can settle in. He had never liked tents and was tired of moving from place to place. But if his heart could find a place to rest while he breathed, he would have nothing to complain about. The old man asked if there were stars in the sky. Rak replied that there would be no loneliness there. God must have created the stars so they could navigate, so they could return to their homes without problems. A blue butterfly came into their chamber. The chief asked if the stargazer could see it. The old man replied that his eyes were getting dark. The chief said he had a gift for him. What kind of gift? Asked the stargazer. Is he thinking of fooling around again? Rak replied, is he going to refuse his gift again? The old man said he would find him quickly this time. Those were his last words. Nebula's butterfly had taken his soul. He wondered what might happen if one died in a lost world. The system has notified that the conditions for creating an afterlife have been established. Does he want to create an afterlife? The conditions for this quiet death are not yet clear. The afterlife is a very important element in Lost World. Even just having a well-thought-out view of the afterlife can increase your chances of winning. The wicked are condemned to endless suffering, while the good go to heaven. This division exists to maintain morality and ethics. Like Valhalla, it can also be used as a training ground for warriors. Afterwards, the souls trained in the afterlife can be sent back to Earth. This will eventually come in handy later on in the game. There is no need to rush now, much is still just beginning. Nebula can control this afterlife any way she wants. Stargazer was now in the ancient meadow. When he opened his eyes from the bright rays of the sun, he noticed that his hand was still there. Looking around, he couldn't believe his eyes. Rak was right, this was the meadow he had spoken of. There are no stars there, and no stone houses. Perhaps he shouldn't have hoped for any of that. Maybe he doesn't need a home at all. It's a really nice gift. The stargazer saw that there were other lizards here. But they still hadn't woken up. There are other deceased people here besides him. It would be rude to wake them now. Suddenly the stargazer sees a child he knows. He is one of the warriors who learned arithmetic from him. It happened when an alliance of goblins broke through their tribe's defenses and ambushed them. Places populated by children and the elderly were in great danger. They could only hope for the arrival of reinforcements. And he realized that they were completely powerless. And he thought their end was near. But this child stood up for himself and said that at the cost of one life, many others could be saved. And he's glad he learned to count, thanks to him. A few warriors from the Black Scale tribe disobeyed the chief's orders because they felt it was necessary. It was a heroic sacrifice that no one wanted. At the funeral of the warriors who never returned to their native land, Rakrak was very angry. He thought it was because of the cursed arithmetic that Stargazer had taught them. The warriors, who were good at counting, disobeyed his orders and rushed into battle. They thought it was a good choice to save 2 lives at the cost of 1. Stargazer asked, "Does the chief think these warriors were wrong?" He replied that he was angry because they were right. All he can do is get angry. After that incident, warriors who were not interested in arithmetic began to study it in secret. He was the one who inspired many to learn numeracy. Stargazer is very happy to meet him again. This little fellow has a very brave heart. He wondered, is there really only meadows here? Is there nothing divine in this place? Suddenly, he saw another lizard come to a stop. He yelled for it to stop. He had to rush after him. Had that lizard disappeared before his eyes, walked into that building? If there was a deity here after all, he'd like to ask him a question. Why did God choose them? Is it because lizards are superior to other races? Because the deity favors them? Or because they are useful? Probably no one would answer those questions. Rakrak said it could just be a coincidence. It was an inevitable choice and perhaps just a result of them doing their best. But in the end, it means they did a good job, so it wasn't that bad, he thinks. Suddenly, he saw the telescope for the first time. Rakrak was right. There are stone houses and stars here. Touched it and realized the body was made of brass and some kind of crystal on the tip. When he looked into it, it was as if he was at a loss for words. Seeing the stars for the first time, that's what they really are. He needs to recalculate the movement of the stars. All his knowledge was superficial. If he could share this knowledge with the living, that would be awesome. Watching him, Nebula said that the stargazer had traveled a long way. The afterlife is not just a place where the dead go. It also has a huge impact on the values of those who believe in a deity. If you send warriors to the afterlife, their race will dream of Valhalla, and if immortals are there, they will start dreaming of the land of the peach blossom. Stargazer realizes that if the scientists found out about this, it would lay the groundwork for the technological process. Especially since a new threat is coming, the afterlife must begin to function properly. A tribe with cropped ears, have iron technology superior to lizards, have tamed saber-toothed tigers. Their technique and movements are unusual. There's probably a player behind this. Fighting them won't be easy, but now they have an afterlife. We must prepare to welcome them properly. The players are gradually expanding their territories. To keep them in check, he invested quite well in small bugs. He has 3 large swarms under his control. A swarm of locusts is called a swarm and can control farming players. Nebula acts quietly, so that no one notices his presence. The strategy is vector. He's used it before. They're useful for spreading a lot of diseases. And of course the nest where different species of beetles are raised. It lets them breed in small areas. The humanoid lizard tribes in the area obey Rakrak. He unites the tribes one by one. Taking control of the southern peninsula is only a matter of time. What will he do with the emotional players? Owen and Y finally made it to the Rakrak tribe. They were immediately informed that Stargazer had died today. The man said he'd heard of him before and thought it wasn't a good time to talk. Owen replied that it was fine. They don't think it's bad when a stranger comes to a funeral. On the contrary, they think it's a good sign. Is it wrong for someone else to share their grief? The man saw the chief for the first time and wondered why the head of the tribe was crying. Owen said, "Don't others cry when they are sad?" We replied that chiefs don't usually do this in front of tribesmen because they have to maintain authority. Owen knows what authority is, but if a leader shows weakness, will the warriors under his command think their commander is weak? Let him not try to force it on the humanoid lizards. They wouldn't understand it anyway. They have what they revere more than authority. It is necessary to know this in order to understand it. Rak greeted the guys. He's glad Owen made it to the funeral in time. But who is that man with him? Owen replied that the man had come to fulfill an errand from the Lord of Automation. His name is Wee, and he's from Automation. Owen decided to tell the chief something he absolutely needed to know. Entering the tent, just the two of them, the chief said he must be tired from the road. But unfortunately they would be up all night, and he hopes the man will understand. That's their tradition. Wai replied that it was okay. First of all, he wants the chief to accept this from him. This is from the Lord of Automation. Saltstone, their specialty, which they are proud of. It is considered the first saltstone that the Lord of Automation gives him and demands nothing in return. The chief asked, does that mean there will be a second and a third? Wai replied that even more, the main thing is to accept it. Rak clenched his fist and broke that stone into small pieces before his eyes. Let him tell his master that he has accepted it. Wai asked, what does that mean? The chief replied that he could not understand it because he had no god. It is just one of the rituals. If you scatter some salt rock on the floor, it will propitiate God. That's all he needs to know. Wai thinks it's a ridiculous lie. It was a gift from the Lord of Automation. Rak said it was just a small piece of salt rock. So he used it, what's the problem? The man replied that the purpose of this gift was different. He did say that the Lord of Automation had said there would be a second and a third and more. Rak had heard that the Lord of Automation was rich, but sending a man to bring so much salt was a bit extravagant. He's right though, next time hopefully the one will bring more. Wai realized that the chieftain was experienced. It's not that he can't communicate because of the different races. Rak is unpleasant, but not rude, and diplomatic in his refusal, speaks with dignity, and does not like to put hidden meanings into words. If something like this happens, he is used to solving it with history. Wai doesn't have that talent either, so if he doesn't like diplomatic rhetoric, let him speak plainly. If the chief understood the offer, why did he refuse? First of all, he doesn't like to accept offers that others have turned down. If someone has already refused once, doesn't that mean the offer is unfavorable? These words made the man think. He said it wasn't like that. It was an offer the Lord of Automation had made only to him. The chieftain asked, did he think Owen had stumbled upon it by accident and was so lucky to have brought it to him? According to him, Wai came from the north, not the west. Automation is in the west, and in the northern wilderness is Salkaida with cropped ears. That means he had already offered the same thing to Socknight and was turned down. Now why doesn't he tell him everything honestly? What's we hiding from Automation? An ancient relic, an automated city. Saturn is an ancient relic that you won't find anywhere else. A real fortress with walls of 5 meters. And then there's the mud wars that are reclaiming Saturn. That, too, is a true wonder of the lost world. In this fortress, which is unknown who built it, there are many people and different tribes living together. Plus, it has a geographical advantage. The valley where Automation is located, the path to the continent. It's in a great location, which is why Automation is so protected. There's a salt mine there, it helps with livestock and farming. Rak said he didn't believe in free gifts, especially if it's a gift from someone hiding their real identity. There's no way he can accept that. If he doesn't deny it, then let him tell how he came to that conclusion. The man probably knows how the lizards feel about the autonomous city. And he probably told them about it to see how much data they had on it. And even considering the castle, few people know him personally. It is said that only the 4 families loyal to the castle know him. People who are of the same blood as the Lord have Y in their name. Rak heard that the Lord has 4 sons and 3 daughters. However, he's not a woman, and judging by the wrinkles on his arms, he's definitely not a young man. Turns out he's the ruler of the automated city, Vizio. The man said he was good at what he did. But how could the chief know? There are no lizards in his entourage. His name is Vizio, the lord of the castle. But that doesn't change anything, he actually gave him salt for free. Rak said no, she has a price. Even the greedy Sockerites refused it because they too understand the point. If he gets his salt, they will have to defend them when they are attacked by enemies. Since they would be worried about the safety of the mine, they would have to help even if they got into the fight themselves. Isn't that what Vizio wanted? The Lord replied that it is called diplomacy. And it can also be called a transaction. Why does he refuse if he knows it will do him good? Rak said that Vizio had already heard the answer to that question. Why don't they just take over their town? If they kick the people out, the salt mine will be theirs, won't it? The man said, so they would attack them? The chief said no, he was only speculating about what would be best for them. Such diplomacy won't do them any good. So wouldn't it be better for them to take over the city? Vizio said that he did not underestimate them. The chief replied that if his calculations were correct, his warriors could do it with few casualties. They follow the blue insect god, and if the god helps them, the high fence and dirt soldiers will turn to ashes. Moreover, isn't he afraid to come to them alone? A man makes their job a lot easier. Vizio doesn't think so. If he dies here, no one will know who the next heir to the castle is. What does the town's heritage have to do with them? The man replied, doesn't the great chief know a game called Go? They place white and black stones at the intersections of the lines. The one who completely covers the opponent's stones wins. But those rules aren't so important right now. What's important is that he's a rock on the board. Rak seems to have figured it all out. The game has already begun. In this game, the gods play using their races as stones. And the gnolls and lizards have already started playing this game. It's called Autonomous City. The chief has already made a decision in the order of inheritance of the town. Some of the time his children started talking about teeth full of anger, while others talked about the blue butterfly. His children have begun to believe in the gods. Unfortunately, Rak can't do anything about it. It doesn't hurt them as much as the attack on the city. 3 weeks ago, there was a clash of civilizations. Hegemony greeted Nebula. It had been a while since they had seen each other. He found that odd. Since when had they become friends? Doesn't he remember them playing the last game of Lost World together? Nebula said, aside from this trivialized story, is there a reason he abandoned this conversation? But didn't that game mean anything to him? He was worried about the holy strategy of orcs who follow trends. But doesn't Hegemony find it boring when he's trying to be lawyered up? He said he was sure to win this time and would definitely nail him. Nebula replied that he always says stupid things. Why would they fight? Who benefits? Maybe Hegemony has forgotten that there will be no other attempt to play. This is their last game. He replied that he knows he just got a little carried away. Nebula understands his style of play. He may seem simple at first, but he has a good flair for conflict. He's also good at multitasking at the same time. In fact, he often won by starting the war early on. But he doesn't need to adjust for his peculiarities. Hegemony asked, getting Nebula wants to determine who is better by using a different method? Toth replied that yes, they both want the same thing. They are putting an autonomous city and people on the line. They'll try to use a controversial prophecy. Prophecy is a skill that is available if your divinity is level 6 or higher. It's similar to a quest that players issue themselves. If you fulfill the prophecy, you get extra experience points. But the penalty for failure is also high. Reduced experience points due to wasting religious resources, and also a bad event can happen. Then what happens if 2 players have opposite prophecies? Hegemony replied that in such a case the prophecy is called contradictory. One side gets a reward and the other side gets a penalty. Perfect. Then which prophecy will they choose? Nebula asked if he knew that the lord of the city was going to choose his heir. Hegemony replied that yes. An autonomous city regularly chooses its ruler, and only the ruler knows how long the ruler will stay in power. In that case, Nebula offered to place his bets. Who will be the next head of the castle? Are they talking about his 5 children? Nebula replied that if they chose different candidates, the conditions for the controversial prophecy would be fulfilled. Hegemony said he had a list, could share it with him. The latter replied that would be fine. The first son, his name is Dan, a man in his 30s. He is strong in body and trusted by Vizio, and he's also getting endorsements from 2 of the 4 major families, and is now considered the strongest candidate. Second son's name is June. He's a little under 30. He's Dan's half-brother, and he's considered weak. June rarely shows himself to the others, and there are rumors that he is not interested in the ruler's position. But he is supported by his family on his mother's side. The third child is Jean, a girl in her mid-20s. She and the first child have the same mother. She hides her identity and goes out to party a lot. She's also good with tough people, kind of like a hunter. She has 1 remaining family on her side. The fourth child is Kyung, a girl in her early 20s. She and the first 2 children have different mothers. Hegemony thinks her mom is already dead, and she has a strange appearance, possibly cursed. Because of this, not only the Lord, but all family members avoid her as much as they can. The last child's name is Min. The girl is still a teenager. People say that she is extremely intelligent and talented in many ways. She got her father's love as she is the youngest child. That's it, now they need to make their choice. Or does Nebula need time for the information to settle in his head? He replied that no, you can decide right away. He offered to choose his person individually, and then compare to make sure they didn't pick the same heir. System notified. Nebula wants to predict a controversial prophecy with player hegemony. If defeated, he will suffer heavy losses. He clicked that he agreed. Hegemony prophecy, Wizio's second son, Jun, will be the heir to the autonomous city. Nebula's prophecy is that Wizio's second daughter, Kyung, will be the heir to the autonomous city. Hegemony seemed surprised. He didn't expect it from him. Nebula said that's great, they picked different people. So he just pressed the yes button. As he says, replied Hegemony. Now it was his turn to press on and we could begin. The contest between Hegemony and Nebula was approved. Vizio had come here to learn the source of the rumors that had been on the lips of others for 3 weeks. The two tribes had moved closer to the autonomous city. Rakrak realizes that they both have large numbers and will be hard to deal with. One of them must be behind the rumor spreading. Wizio said since he hasn't died yet after meeting both chiefs, it means he's just a stone on the board. This gives him a forlorn confidence. The chief thinks it's easy when you can put diplomacy and respect aside. And he can choose one of the two. Sockate or Rakrak, Gnolls or Lizardmen, the god of evil teeth or the nameless god of beetles. The man replied that it's not that simple. He thinks that in this situation the question is whether it would hurt less to put your head in the mouth of a saber-toothed tiger or a lizard. Rakraku felt sorry for him, but wouldn't it be better to put his head in the lizard's mouth? Sockate told the man it would be better to choose the tiger, and if he lets them fight amongst themselves, the winner will be exhausted. It looks like the Lord wants to back off. Or is he not ready to make a decision? At least to Rakrak it looks that way when he says he accepts the fate of the stone on the board. Vizio said that was enough, but he had one last question. Eventually Rakrak himself will end up as a stone at the crossroads of lines. Does that not make him angry or scared? The chief said he would answer that question when he had dealt with everything. Vizio understood. He came out and said he didn't need to be seen off. The man was expected by his men. They gave him different clothes and he shaved his beard. Apparently such is the true face of the leader of an autonomous city. A fourth child named Kyung was on the verge of death. She thought she could pass it with a wagon, but something went wrong. People said she was cursed and that she had killed her mother in childbirth, and also that there had been accidents all around her since she was a child. At 13, she fell down the steps at the market. At 14, she was accused of stealing salt and placed in jail for 4 days. She fell in the toilet. And no joke, the girl almost died. Once even a jug of water fell on her head. And there was also an incident when a pack of stray dogs chased her all night. So she thinks it's nothing now. What was she even thinking? Passing with a wagon here is unrealistic. Now she's lost all her silk. And there's nowhere to step, but it's okay. Because she's the best at taking pain. If she climbs up, stepping on both feet at the same time, she'll do well. Suddenly a lizard appeared from somewhere and offered his help. Let her take hold of his hand. The girl asked what the lizard was doing here. He replied that he didn't think she could afford to have long conversations. Kyung said she has nothing. She's broke. Let her calm down. The lizard grabbed her arm and lifted her up. He didn't need anything from her. This road is barely enough for one person to pass. Also because of the precipice she is risking her life. What was she thinking when she pulled the wagon here? Kyung replied that if the wheels hadn't broken, there wouldn't have been a problem. She asked what his name was. The lizard replied that his name was Sira Mule. The least she can do is thank him for saving her. The lizard stopped her by calling her by name. They weren't done talking yet. The girl froze in place with fear. How did he know her name? She slipped her hand into her pocket to pull out her knife. Mule replied that Rakrak had told him and also ordered him to find her. Kyung asked, is he talking about the chief of the Black Cheek tribe? About the hunter and the thunder lizard? Is this the chosen one? The lizard replied that they just call him chief. But why is he looking for her? Mule said it might be because of the rumors that have been going around lately. The girl had recently gone to the distance for silk, so she hadn't heard any rumors. No wonder things had gone downhill. Mule had heard that the Lord's second child would become the next ruler of their city. And someone claims that the fourth child will become the head of the castle. Kyung says it's just a rumor. Lizard knows she's Wizio's fourth child, but these rumors have nothing to do with her. She's an outcast. Probably one of her brothers or sisters started the rumors, because they could have benefited from it. They can't get anything from her, so let her turn her eyes to another family member. He knows perfectly well who she is, and the castle lord's children must hide their identities. It's an ironclad law of autonomy. This lizard looks strong, but she may have to kill it. Mule said she misunderstood him. The second order of business was to protect her life. She said it's just a rumor, and it's understandable that siblings might react badly to it. They will make her their target, so she won't be a rival for them. But Kyung believes she can protect herself. Mule had received orders from the chief and was obliged to protect her. These words made the girl a little furious. She showed him her broken horns. A curse. Kyung was born after ripping her mother's belly open with her horns. Her life is full of other failures and accidents, so she's a loner. Mule is very sorry, but it doesn't matter if she's really cursed or not. He still has to do the bidding of their leader. Even if Kyun refuses, he will still be there for her. She has no other choice. If scaring him away didn't work, the only thing left to do was to make him feel her hardship. Does she have to go with a huge, strong lizard now? She realized that it wasn't so bad. He would come to her rescue, even if he was in danger. She has to get the silk first, she has to go down and she'll be back. Mule doesn't think she can do anything with her leg. If a girl wants to make people listen to her, there's a better way to do it. She could ask him to help. Kyung blushed in embarrassment and asked if he could help bring her silk. The lizard replied that of course he would help. The girl asked how he knew she was here. Mule said he asked around, calling her fake name Manji. Doesn't that name suit her better? She's more concerned that her business partners sold information about her so easily. Mule replied that they laid it all out for him at once when he gave them each a bag of salt. They also said that she had been planning to go into the silk business for a long time, but they didn't know where the girl got it from. They also said she borrowed a wagon and never came back, so they thought they'd been tricked. It had been several days since Kyung had disappeared from the town. Does she think she has lost the trust of her business associates and others? However, they can leave this conversation as the autonomous city is already visible. The girl said that only some traders from the autonomous city know this way. She'll talk to Jaeho's family about selling the silk. Suddenly someone attacked them from behind. The lizard managed to get his arm up and deflect the blow. Mule said Rak was right. Someone is trying to kill her. The battle for the throne has begun. He made quick work of them, tying them all up so they wouldn't run away. Kyung said that Mule is a pretty good fighter. She knows that Yor is the most famous among the lizards. Yor is the best warrior of the tribe. He learned everything from him. The girl asked if he had learned healing from him as well. Mule replied that no, it was taught by Jael when he was her servant. Jael is in charge of the internal affairs of the tribe. She is literally a female version of Rak. He was a servant under the direct protection of Jael herself. He also learned to fight from Yor, so he's some kind of big shot in the Blackhide tribe, and someone like him was sent to protect her. She thinks she's very lucky. Mule gave them some silk. This infuriated the girl as to why the lizard was giving them her silk. He replied that it was necessary to bribe them. When they reached the town, they saw that the castle gates were closed, the guards not allowing anyone to pass. Kyung asked the passers-by why the gate of the autonomous city was closed. She was told that if she was a silk merchant, she couldn't get in. They say the entrance to the city is closed indefinitely, and if he gets in, he can't get out. Without thinking for a long time, the boys walked in and headed over to Jaeho's family to provide the silk. Kyung asked the guy what was the look on his face. She's the one who should be angry. The cart she was taking fell apart and she almost died. He said it looked like the girl hadn't heard anything yet. Did anything strange happen to them? Kyun replied that she was almost killed, but she was lucky that the Black Lizard tribe had sent a warrior to protect her. It would be nice to thank him. The lizard introduced himself. He is Sira Mule of the Black-Scaled tribe. The guy is a pleasure to meet. He's the leader of the Jaeho family, one of the 4 families of the autonomous city. Mule has talked to the goblins who tried to kill this young lady, and it seems that Jaeho's family had nothing to do with it. He replied that, of course, since they don't do mean things unlike other families. Kyung asked what really happened in the castle. It obviously wasn't because the damned fourth daughter had been assassinated. It happened here too, the Lord is away, there was an assassination attempt here, and the potential heir to the autonomous city, her brother, Waidan, is missing. Kyung said it's been a very long time since the last time she was here. Though she was close to her older brother, over time they began to avoid each other. Mool said he smelled blood at the bottom of the table. They saw a large number of footprints. With that many, he's probably dead by now. The guy came back and said they found it too. Problem is, they couldn't find the body. To prevent the culprit from escaping, they locked the gate as soon as they discovered the tracks. The city was immediately sealed off and trade was suspended. Now only time is needed to catch the culprit. Kyung thought, did the assassin dare to do this, realizing all the possible risks? She shouldn't think about it too much. Like he said, there was nothing he could do. Suddenly she heard a voice in her head. It asked if she wanted to know everything. Or would she pretend again that it didn't concern her? Mule looked at her and asked if she was okay. The voice told her that the culprit could have just put the body in salt and thrown it away. The killer made a barrel to hold the body. Who doesn't raise suspicion in a case like this? You need to look among those who are in the business of producing or storing their own meat. Mule guessed it was butchers and hunters. He did it to keep the meat from rotting. To keep the body from rotting, the killer put it in salt to throw away later. A man who can smuggle a hunter into a castle with him and stores a lot of dried meat in barrels at his house. But who can go in and out of this room in peace? She is a hunter in the struggle for the throne of an autonomous city. Her older sister is Wai Jin. Wai Kyung's reasoning was convincing. Only a few people in the castle were informed of what had happened. But when Wai Dan's death became known to everyone in town, everyone came to the conclusion that Wai Jin was the prime suspect. She thought she had planned everything perfectly. I'm surprised that some simpleton Wai Kyung figured it out so quickly. On her way to escape, she was met by Wai Min. She told her sister that she just underestimated everyone around her. How did they get here? Wai Min's archers killed her assistant in a flash. The girl asked what had made her so angry. Wasn't she the one who killed Brother Dan? If Wai Min did the same to her, then she has no right to be outraged. Only the strongest of them is worthy to rule. She killed him for the throne, didn't she? So it's time to end their damn family ties. Those were her last words to her older sister. The archers had done their job. It was over for her too. A sharp dagger piercing her chest. It's her older brother, Wai Jun. The guy says she's right, that's exactly what he's going to do. Now, out of all his siblings, there was only one obstacle left. Wai Kyung doesn't have long to live. The girl was surprised to learn that Wai Jin and Wai Min were found dead next to Wai Dan's body. The Lord said it meant that the murderer was not going to hide. Of course, she replied, even a fool would understand. Wai Jin made the first move, and Wai Min anticipated it and waited for her. And understanding perfectly the thoughts of both sisters, he waited for their meeting to get rid of two birds with one stone. If the goblin attack was Wai Jun's doing, then everything fits. If Mule was late, it could be made to look like a roadside robbery. The Lord said that the real struggle for the throne was beginning. Kyung replied that it was already clear to everyone. The Geo family just had a meeting about it. And what is the Geo family's decision? The Lord replied that it is quite obvious that Wai Jun is now dominating their fight. So they decided to bet on her. There's always been a chance. However, it is only inaccurate calculations and to some extent excitement rather than blind faith. Kyung thanked her and said she understood. So there's just surviving. The girl said she'd do her best. She decided to fight on, despite that damn body. It seems that for the first time there is someone who believes in her. Another interview on the subject was in progress and many ideas flew between the ears of our heroes. Attempted murder is unacceptable. They must catch Wai Jun. The man said that the Sun family is on Wai Jun's side, so it's not an easy task. Shouldn't we get Su's family on their side? Mule said let her not even think of cutting off her horns. It's okay that they grew back again. The girl replied that okay. She had already given up on that. If she had known there would be so much blood, she wouldn't have even tried it. Kyung didn't want to bring up the subject of her horns again. If you compare her life 15 days ago to now, she just wasn't used to them. Mule said let her think of them as a reward for all the suffering she's endured over the past couple weeks. A guy came in and notified everyone that there was news from outside the castle. The Holy Lord will be here soon. Kyung asked when he would arrive. The boy replied that the Lord wasn't moving that fast, so he wouldn't arrive until tomorrow morning at the earliest. And there's also news from the scouts that he can only tell her in person. However, this guy didn't want to say anything. He tried to pull out his knife to kill Kyung. Mule and the goblin destroyed him. The lizard asked if this guy wasn't one of Jaeho's family. One of the goblins said he thinks he was bribed. Mule thinks he shouldn't trust the Jaeho family members now. Suddenly, they heard many voices coming from the street. As it turned out, Jun had been preparing an attack for a long time before the Lord arrived. It seems like everyone here wants to end things right here and now. Kyung always hoped she never used that path. Mule said there's no safer way than this way. Even if she doesn't like it, they can't go back. Given the circumstances, they have no choice. The girl said she was going first. Don't just stand there. Let him come down quickly. They'll be here any minute. She definitely has a stronger stomach than he thought. She says she's used to bugs by now. When Kyung was little and was going to the bathroom, she accidentally fell in one time. The lizard asked, why is she talking about it like that, as if it's a common situation at all? It's not like it's a joke. He's right about that. The girl almost died. It was because the floor was rotten. Then she got stuck in a huge pile of shit. She managed to roll into the sewer and not get hurt. But she didn't see a single ray of light and thought it was the end. Seeing blue orbs flying around, she followed the light and saw the outline of an exit and a sewer. Kyung decided to catch one of these orbs, and it turned out it was just a bug with light coming out of its tail. They were fireflies. Mule said they don't come to places like this. She doesn't know. But there really were a lot of them. I mean, she even managed to catch one. It seemed very strange because they were in the sewers, where they don't live at all. Well, maybe it was a different species. They had finally reached. He had discovered this exit during his recircumnavigation of the area. The passage leads to the basement of 7 Seuss hunting cabin. Mule will go first, so please have him wait here. If he doesn't come back after a while, then immediately have him run in the opposite direction. Kyung realizes that she is still alive only because of Mule's caution. They've had a few fights. So much has happened in the last 3 weeks, we'll just have to wait here. But suddenly the girl heard a loud voice and realized she couldn't just wait. Pulled out her knife and headed for the exit. She will no longer just watch someone die. The first thing Kyung saw was his friend Mule standing there bleeding. Jun said it's too late. Let him think that this lizard is already dead. Mule shouted at him to shut up. The boy was surprised the lizard still had the energy to talk. Jun ordered his men to forget about the lizard. Let them kill Kyung. Mule's got them all scattered all over the place. They don't stand a chance, he won't give up. Kyung had the choice to run. She knows it was the only and right decision, right? But why did she disobey and do such a stupid thing? The girl answered that she didn't know. Sometimes people will consciously choose to do something wrong, knowing it's a big mistake. Even if it ends up leading to their own demise. It's not like she's a person though, you have to generalize that concept. The chief simply ordered him to protect her. He didn't ask her to risk her life, but now they're in the same boat with her. Jun said that whoever kills the lizard and Kyung will be rewarded with a whole cartload of silk. How long are they going to give in to this lizard? He's wounded. Let them put their honor on the line and kill them. His men said his spirit was too fierce to call him an ordinary warrior. There were even rumors that he was one of the chosen ones. Jun doesn't think so. If he's the chosen one, why would he hide his true powers until he was pierced in the back with a spear? Looking at the wall, he realized that there was a large concentration of salt crystals and obviously a salt mine nearby. Mule informed Kyung that they were about to run to the right. The girl asked, toward that wall? As Jun said, he's not the chosen one. But that doesn't mean he's considered a weak warrior. Mule is the second strongest of the lizards. But no one remembers second. Let her remember they run to the right. But there's a wall there, the girl asked. He replied that he would fix it now. Mule crashed with all his speed into it and broke it. The others froze without realizing what had happened. Jun shouted to his men to quickly rush after them. Kyung asked if Mule was okay. Let her be patient a little longer. Suddenly they saw a dead end. The girl asked if maybe he should at least get some rest. If he tried to pull the blade out of the wound, the blood would start pouring nonstop. Kyun suddenly cried. She said let her ignore it. Mule said he was just trying to understand. Was he the reason she was crying? The girl said yes. What's the point of all this if he's going to die? It's always the same. Something bad happens to the people around her. Did she still think it was because of the curse? How much danger had they already been through in the last 3 weeks? And they overcame everything together and are still alive. That's usually called luck. The girl realized that she was indeed lucky. Does she remember the first time they met? When he went down the cliff to pick up the silk, he noticed something odd about the cart. There were clearly visible signs of intentional damage to the device used to secure the axle. Kyung borrowed this cart before the struggle for the throne began. The same things have happened to her before. The fact that the bathroom floor collapsed like that is also suspicious. This whole thing with her siblings only started recently, so it seems like someone was trying to kill her long before that. She realized she already knew that, and she knows who tried to kill her. The lizard has already lost a lot of blood. Now they are inside the salt mine, so this time they won't be able to break through the wall again and escape. He gave the order to kill them. Kyung realized that so be it. She couldn't blame the curse in this situation. If she dies, it will only be her own fault. Mule said he would now see what happens next. He means with her luck. Suddenly a huge blue portal appeared in front of them, blinding their eyes. It's that magic stingray. He said his name was Pajihi. Siran Mule would be elected. Everyone around them was shocked at what they heard. Wai Jun told his men that they were so close. What was the hesitation? Are they going to regret not joining the gnolls? What nonsense! Let them take up their spears and bows and shoot them now. Pajihi said there will be many obstacles in Mule's path. The lizard asked, only 5 in their tribe were chosen, so does that make him chosen as the new number 6? Or did someone die? He replied that the stargazer had left this world. Mule is the second bravest lizard in his tribe. That's enough to become the chosen one. He will now follow God's will. By doing his will, the lizard can borrow God's power. After saying that, Pajihi disappeared before their eyes. Jun's men moved into the battle. No one could save them now. Now having divine power, Mule pulled out the maple and immediately set his wound on fire to stop the bleeding. Despite being in so much pain, he feels a surge of tremendous energy. These people don't seem to understand what's really going on. Kyung thinks so too. Mule said then we'd have to explain it all to them on our fingers. Many of his men fell in front of his eyes from Mule's electric wave. Some decided to run away brokenly. Wai Jun realized that now the forces were not equal and decided to run away with the others. That's just incredible power. Kyung asked how the lizard was feeling. He replied that he was fine. She wondered why, with such power, the lizards had not yet exterminated the gnolls. Said he couldn't give an answer to that question yet. Mule doesn't think he can use this power indefinitely, and feels like it's consuming some of his mental energy. I think he understands Owen now because he often smokes a pipe after using force. Kyung asked again, is he sure he's okay? Mule replied that he was just tired, but he could still fight. The bleeding had been stopped and he was feeling better. They decided to move on, and there were a few more enemy men on their way. The lizard quickly put them to bed. Hegemony has been watching all of this closely. He cannot allow events to continue in this vein. I didn't want to resort to this, but I have to. This should stop them. A huge saber-toothed tiger stood in their way. Mule didn't understand why it was there. Maybe he climbed up the wall and then went down the salt mine? Anyway, Mule's strength is much more powerful, and he had no trouble defeating this tiger. Kyung said she realizes that so much hell has happened in the last few days. She thinks this is just another manifestation of it. The biggest worry is what awaits them outside, since her brother is still alive. When they finally got outside, they saw him immediately. He shouted for them to be damned. They made him do that. Kyung asks who started this whole mess. Then, Jun thinks it's all her fault. Bringing that damn lizard into the castle. The battle for the inheritance was only supposed to break out between brothers. If she becomes the heir while using the power of outsiders, does she think things will remain the same in the autonomous city? The humans will be forced out of the castle and the lizards will take over. Kyung asked, did he think it was all her fault? Wai Jun shouted to his men that it was enough to listen to their lies. Let them kill them. However, the lizard quickly dispatched them. He was confused. How did he have so much stamina in him? The lizard should have fainted from blood loss and exhaustion. Wai Kyung shouted that his brother is a real idiot. He doesn't even understand the reasons for what's happening. An autonomous city is a castle that lives and thrives on trade alone. If it does not establish ties with its nearest neighbors, it will be cut off from them and will be left without a market. Did the guy still not realize that the whole environment was trying to control them? If he's so smart, he should have guessed that, and used them in return. Unlike him and her father, she's not a coward. She is ready to take the autonomous city to the next level. Wai Jun smiled and said that the girl not only looks like one of them but also thinks differently. Her thoughts are poisoned. Let her know that he never thought of her as a sister. The girl noticed that June suddenly opened the fan. Was this some kind of signal? The only place to hide unnoticed is in front of the warehouse. It's too far to throw a dagger, so it'll have to be a bow or crossbow. The inner voice said the arrow had an iron tip and 3 feathers. It's aimed at her heart. Hopes she's not going to gag her when she's one step away from death. If nothing is done, they'll both die. Or does he think he can stop the arrow? Too slow, Mule reacted too. But too late, he wouldn't get a save. She could have warned her when she spotted the assassin. Then her horns hadn't fully grown back yet. Now let her try to imagine how she could have avoided getting hit. Kyung said she didn't know. Maybe the wind would suddenly blow and a gust would deflect the arrow? The voice replied that wind is good. The wind is always on her side. Uncertainty grows. The arrow that was supposed to pierce her heart just whirled and steamed through the air. But what is it this time? A curse or a stroke of luck? The voice replied that it was much more complicated than that, and did not fit into those two simple concepts. She sees an infinite number of diverging paths in the future and chooses those that lead to the best outcome. Kyung can control probability. She is enveloped in a canopy of demonic energy, and now recognized the essence of demonic nature. Hegemony's jaw nearly dropped. Nebula replied, "Did he think him so stupid that he would choose a cursed child? But how could that be possible?" The description of the character's backstory clearly states that she has a curse on her, and how come it's suddenly not a curse, but a demonic spirit? Did he interfere and edit the description of her biography? Nebula said the description of her background hasn't changed since she and he came into this world. He wondered how Hegemony had been able to find out that she was a demon. After all, he himself had not been sure of that from the beginning. Even initially thought it was a curse of bad luck. But it turned out that countless random accidents were actually attempted assassinations. Nebula found out about it the time she fell through the toilet. It was the servant who damaged the boards before Wai Kyung went in there. She had already gotten it in her head that she wouldn't be able to go for a proper bath after this incident. However, no matter how it was, from every such situation, even when death seemed imminent, Kyung got out alive and unharmed. Nebula realized that by watching her, he would be able to know what lurked within her. That's how he came to the conclusion that it's not a curse of bad luck. Rather, it was the blessing of great good fortune. Something called the magic of probability. Having a being possessed by a demonic spirit is a huge advantage in itself. But that's over now. Hegemony said he was a bit toad strangled when he splurged on summoning a saber-toothed tiger. But it was worth it. The victory was his. Nebula replied that it sounded pathetic, but who said he won? Since Nebula hasn't killed Wai Jun yet, is there anything else he could do? Morning came and Lord Wiseo returned. He told his children to stop. The hegemony thinks it's over. Wiseo has returned, which means only one thing. All the families inside the castle must immediately end their confrontation. He wants to get everything sorted out as quickly as possible, and just name the next successor. And it might even happen right now. Wiseo will appoint Wai Jun as his heir, because they have similar views on how to run the city. And if that happens, there's nothing Wai Kyung can do about it. There's no point in killing Wiseo. The families won't support someone who does that. But what if he's wrong? Why is he so sure that Wiseo will appoint Jun as the heir? The man said there was no need to fight anymore. He will appoint his heir right here and now. Kyung thinks she should tell him something before that happens. Her father noticed her horns. The daughter let them grow back. And Kyung noticed that he had shaved off his beard. Kyung asked, all this time he had been trying to kill her? The man froze in place, unsure of what to do next. But how, when had she managed to find out? The girl answered that a long time ago, but all this time she had been deceiving herself, and did not want to believe it. Why would her father torture her to kill her? Because of the fact that her mother died giving birth to her? Because of the cursed mark that has haunted her all her life? Even though that rumor was created by him. Her father replied that her mother wanted to leave her life to her, for she was very weak. That's why she died of mountain fever after the baby girl was born. Why Rio was special to him. He couldn't accept losing her. It hurt more than she could ever imagine. And at that moment, the word curse swirled in his head. The father then chose to justify that his wife died because of a curse brought into their home from her birth with those horns. His days as ruler of the castle had become unbearable. She was always looming in front of him, the one who took away his most precious possession. That's why Yasuo couldn't leave her behind. The girl said enough was enough, that was all she wanted to know. Now let her do what she wants. Jun shouted to his father that the legacy would determine the fate of the autonomous city. You can't let guilt influence his decision. The man replied not to worry, even though he was an old, battered man, but when it comes to such things, he will make the decision as the lord of the autonomous city, not as his father. Man is just a bargaining chip for a game of Go, thrown on the board by the will of the gods. This will be his last voluntary decision, and so he chooses. Hegemony started praying to all the gods and Buddha. Nebula grinned and said that wouldn't work. They were the gods here. Suddenly, Nebula saw the outline of dark magic. It looked like it needed a closer look. The voice told Kyung, his upper lip stretching, his father wants to say her name. She would be the one to be the ruler. Kyung replied that her father is avoiding the problem. Even she doesn't know herself completely, and he chooses a path that will allow him to absolve some of the guilt. Later, this story will spread around the castle. The ruler tried to kill his own child, and because of his guilt, he left him in power. Those who support Jun will actively spread this rumor. And then everyone will wonder if she even deserves it. They'll say she's just lucky to be the ruler. The four major families, well, the commoners won't follow her, and her position will quickly be jeopardized. Kyung decided that she shouldn't be appointed heir by her father. She needs to achieve this title on her own. She said she changed her mind. She thought it over carefully and decided that she should be the next ruler, regardless of my father's wishes. She asks that the castle be handed over to her. Jun told his father to think about it. That monster is now threatening him. The man responded by telling the guy to shut up. Can she tell him how she can handle all the warriors behind him? Will she have the courage to prove her words indeed? Let them look at the lizard. He's the chosen one of the black lizard tribe. She doesn't know if he has the strength to kill everyone here or not. I'm sure there would definitely be enough of them to kill half of them and help her escape. Sungjin shouted that it was a brazen lie. The lizard is injured and exhausted. That day, Wizio saw the organization of their tribe. The strength of the chosen one. He remembers clearly the impression Rakrak had made on him. He's an intimidating individual. I guess the presence of the chosen one here is no coincidence. This lizard is sent here to make him make the right decision. This is God's way of influencing people. Father said that the girl should know that the autonomous city is special. If he dies without naming an heir, then people will choose the new ruler themselves, evaluating the abilities of candidates. And then who will be appointed as the next ruler? Kyung wouldn't want to bring things to this situation. But in that case, she would seek the support of the Black Scale tribe, using the power of their warriors to force the castle to empty. And in that case, she would be the only person left to decide who would be the next ruler. Jun called her a dirty girl. She doesn't even try to hide her sneaky nature. Finally, the girl is openly announcing her intentions. Wizio feels he has no choice. As the ruler of the autonomous city, he appoints Waikyung as his heir. His order would take effect immediately. Jun couldn't believe it and couldn't even stay on his feet at the news. A few days later, in an automated city. For the first time in a long time, people thought their lives were getting better, because the squabbling over inheritance is over. However, the autonomous city is slightly different from what it used to be. Trade with other races has increased. Never before. And the number of traders coming to them from distant lands has also increased. The four main families sit quietly in the castle and do nothing. The boy thinks that they have accepted the changes that have taken place in the town with the arrival of the new ruler. Jun listened to this on the sidelines and thought that some nonsense was going on. Was this creature that cooperated with the lizards really recognized as a ruler? He decided to leave this place and gain strength, gain supporters. Then he could return and take back what was rightfully his. Mule noticed this and asked where the boy was going. He asked back, what does he care? The lizard said he didn't care. He wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Whether he stays or goes, it doesn't matter. Jun got on his horse and told the lizard to roll the hell up and rush off on his long journey. Mune knows that this guy is just another annoying nuisance. He shouldn't be in Waikyung's path. It's time to answer for your evil deeds. The goblin leapt at him with its sharp knife and robbed him of all hope. Hegemony has admitted he lost. He knows that those who do not know how to admit defeat cannot evolve. He's hurt, but Nebula won fair and square. Hegemony recognized his defeat and left Nebula with the god's inherent majesty. He made the decision to lead a tribe of gnolls across the continent and reach the western lands. The negative events that will now happen to his flock because of the unfulfilled prophecy are only part of the inconvenience he will face. He said the winner takes all, but he didn't take their bet seriously. They won't see each other for a while. Nebula saw that he was driving forward the progress of the nation entrusted to him, stealing the technology and achievements of the continent's inhabitants. His confidence in battle and combat is remarkable. Hegemony sent his tribe on this journey from their starting position, leaving an empty space behind them. This could be a great opportunity to expand their influence and going off the beaten path to utilize these lands. Northern coastal lands and the southern half of the peninsula. Since all these territories are coastal, sooner or later they may be needed. There is, after all, a small stretch of water, which was home to a monster of frog people. The interesting thing is that this snake is a freshwater snake, and it could not normally use areas surrounded by seawater. Nebula decided to think about all of this later. Right now he needed to meet the new ruler of the autonomous city. Young Kyung studied the new materials that the city's engineers had provided. Her rest was disturbed by Nebula's firefly. The girl immediately opened her eyes. Isn't he the god of those blue bugs? The followers of the blue bug god have done a lot for her. She realizes she's still at the beginning of her journey, but she doesn't have anything yet that a god would be interested in. Kyung has only started a few businesses. Nebula turned the bug into a piece of iron before her eyes. Kyung didn't understand what that could mean. All she knows is that it's a metal plaque they use in trade calculations. Kyung thought that God wanted her to donate the money, but suddenly Mule appeared behind her. The girl didn't understand. Was he the god of bugs? Or was it just a dream? Kyung fell off the chair and finally realized it was a dream. Walking through the market, she was still thinking about that dream. If that dream was some kind of revelation, though unfortunately she can't think of any idea how she can use the plaques to help God. Maybe it was the material that mattered? Should we be looking at iron? I guess you have to score points with God. What did it mean after all? She noticed Troll, who liked the lizard silk a lot. The troll said it was the first time he had seen silk of such good quality. The lizard assures me the silk is the same as ever. He has traded in it on previous visits to the city. The troll said it was his first time in an autonomous city. He came from far away from the west. West is where the sun sets. The Gnoll tribes used to block the road, so there was no way to go east freely. The lizard had never met anyone like him. But he should make a final decision. Would he take it? The troll says he'll take everything he has. What do you say? Good deal. The lizard asked as he held the iron in his hand. It's a great deal, he agrees. Such quality silk would be expensive. Was there enough plaques? No sooner had the lizard said he was agreeing to such a deal than he was suddenly interrupted. The leader of the automated city told Org to keep the money to himself. She apologizes to him. This merchant had already promised to sell her the whole lot. The troll was surprised and asked the lizard if that was really the case. The leader's look immediately made it clear to the lizard that it was necessary to lie. Troll is sorry, he doesn't want to be upset. But since that's the case, Kyung threatened the lizard if he continued to do business this way, he would be in even more trouble. Does the lizard really think that this silk could be sold for such a value? She used to be a merchant too. Is he sure the silk is worth that much? The lizard said that he had come here with Chief Rakrak's caravan and had brought the silk on a cart. There was no problem with transportation to the castle. Originally, he was selling it more expensive, but this time he decided to drop the price a bit. That's not what Kyung meant at all. If a lizard trades that way, it will never be able to trade profitably. Doesn't he know how rare the goods he sells are? Everything they bring in is like that. If his shipping and production costs are lower, it does not mean that he has to sell the product at a lower price. Especially when it comes to an expensive commodity like silk. And something else, let him look closely. It's called a scale. The troll iron will be on the right. Scales are needed to determine the weight of one object relative to another, and this tablet is forged in their castle. We need to compare its weight to the weight of the troll iron plate. The lighter one goes up. The iron that the troll offered him is lighter. Next time he exchanges his goods for iron, Let him check its weight first. Someone in the back said it was some kind of weird and useful device. It was Chief Rak. Could Kyung compare the weight of this plaque for him? The girl replied that, of course, the scales of the autonomous city are famous for their high accuracy. Looking closer at the sign, the girl realized that it was a little different from the wish. She hadn't seen one before. Rak said that this iron was mined from ancient ruins. It is of very good quality, but it is difficult to smelt. Their blacksmiths have given up. He thinks there may be very different possibilities at the castle. Will they be able to melt this iron and make a weapon out of it? Kyung remembered, after all, the bug god had shown this particular iron. Was this what he wanted from her? Kyung said that of course she could do it. But the next day she had doubts. If she says they failed, her reputation as ruler of the autonomous city is over in Rak's eyes. The girl asked the blacksmith if he could tell her the reason she had such confidence in her words. After all, the man had told her that just by looking at the ingot of metal that he would do everything without a problem. That was why she had given Chief Rak an unequivocal and confident answer. He had promised to finish the job on time, but the damn metal seemed to mock him. Any forging that would normally take 10 strokes might barely make it past 30 or 40. The blacksmith managed to produce one spearhead with great difficulty, working all day with a single billet. His arms are just falling off, so he won't take to doing more. But why shouldn't he rest? The ruler asked. He replied that it doesn't work that way. If the smelter cools down, it will have to be heated up again from scratch. That would use up a huge amount of coal. What about using more people as helpers? It would take a couple years to train them to an acceptable level of performance. Kyung said that she understood everything. The man has done a great job. Let him go to rest. Siren Mule came into the room and asked, "Is she still concerned about the iron situation? Looks like she'll have to come clean with Rak." The girl was so sure they could work that iron. What do you think, they'll sign their own helplessness and show Rak that an automated city is a lousy ally? There's nothing to be done about all this, is there? The Rak she knows has always been lenient. Siren thinks he'll say it's all right. They didn't work out with that iron either. However, the girl is puzzled. This hurts her pride even more. Kyung pulled herself together and said there was nothing to be done, they had to go. The lizard asked if she wasn't going to read the letters. The girl replied that she would look into that later. There's something we should definitely check first. Make it go faster. The mud warriors of the automated city only inhabit the inner part of the palace. They help keep order around here. Kyung said they never learned how to control them, but she didn't call him for them. The girl wants to show him something else. Siro was surprised, for this was the first time he had ever seen something like this. The city's water source is inside the castle, and it is for this reason that they are not afraid of sieges. The water falling from above spins the wheel and generates tremendous force. The lizard said that it reminds them of a blacksmith's hand that never tires. However, they do not fully know how strong this flow is. Kyun wants to use this power for more than just iron work. With her help, she wants to change the autonomous city, so she needs his help. They will pave a new path for the water. It will start higher than it does now. The idea is to mount the new wheels just below the existing one, trying not to weaken the power of the water flow. Jail said that if you take into account the volume of water at the source and the size of the wheel already in place, the idea looks quite feasible. But for the realization of such a large-scale idea will require a huge amount of manpower. You'll also need a special kind of tree that doesn't grow in these parts, and in large quantities. The ruler said that money is not a problem for them. Jail replied that the question is not whether she can afford the construction. The problems start the moment she is about to invest a huge amount of money in one particular project, while realizing whether the possible profit from its launch matches her expectations, especially in a situation like hers. Politically, she's still weak. If she spends the money she has without getting the results she wants, she'll be quickly criticized by her opponents. Can she handle it? The girl once again turned to her other self. She knows the future. The entity replied that it was not the spirit of prophecy, and could only affect her surroundings in the moment. Let her tell the future she sees. Kyung will leave the first wheel unloaded. It will be her legacy, a gift to the next ruler. To the second, they will connect the furs that bring air to the smelters. If there is enough coal there, the furnace will never go out. On the axle of the third wheel, they'll attach a hammer. It will be able to forge even iron that no ordinary man can handle. And the fourth and final wheel will be connected to the millstones. It will provide them with flour. The voice said okay. Kyung wondered, how is that good and that's it? Essence just tells her what comes to mind. She can't see the future. Anyway, she likes the idea. They'll do it. We need to build water wheels. The construction of the water wheels was fraught with many difficulties. It was not without accidents. They even got screwed over a few times with deliveries. But the biggest problem was something else entirely. There's no way they could have fitted a fourth wheel. Still, there's a difference between theory and practice. The leader of the Geo family said that there was a mistake in the free space height calculations. It's an unpleasant situation. But why don't they end up on 3 wheels? After all, under current circumstances, installing a fourth wheel would require removing the 3 already installed. The governor said there's nothing to be done. That means we have to start over again. But if they start over again, it will take twice as long. Plus, they're having problems with the people they've hired. Kyung asked, is there any problem? Building wheels was a mission assigned to her by the Blue Beetle god, whose patronage is the best chance for the autonomous city's survival. Though they incur the wrath of the gods, let them pass it on to everyone while she breathes. Do her best to keep her promise to God. They will finish all 4 wheels. Nebula looked at it and couldn't remember when it was he who had asked for 4 wheels to be built. But people have always been like this. Extremely ambitious and driven. They are nothing like the relatively simple and honest ogres. Construction continued and the deadline was pushed back on the pretext of fulfilling a divine commission. After all, they are all merchants first and foremost. And as they built, they benefited in one way or another. After all, the people employed at work are also potential buyers. The turnover of goods was growing and the next expansion of the market district in the city definitely promised new profits. After months of hard work, the most technologically advanced structure of this world, under the pressure of a powerful stream of water, came into motion. Everyone was shocked that this thing actually worked. Kyung had been many places in her short life, but today she was once again convinced that there was no place greater and more amazing than a self-contained city. The iron forged by their craftsmen has always been highly valued and in demand. Kyung apologizes to the Lord for using his name so recklessly, but she has faith that he will understand her. The system has notified the new skill iron production has reached level 2. His civilization is now capable of producing better quality metal. Steel is now available to create more durable and long-lasting objects. On the 3rd continent, the first type of exchangeable currency called tokens was issued, and also the first writing system was developed. His skills developed much faster than the rest of the players. Isn't that wonderful? It was for this reason that he chose humans as his second race. One of the elves didn't realize what the sound was making. The comrade suggested that it was the noise made by the famous water wheels of the autonomous city. Rumor has it that they use one of the giant wheels to mill grain inside the castle. How big is it if the sound it makes can be heard even here? The lizard trader said that the wheels were used to produce not only grain, but all the weapons of the Black Cheek tribe. Since they had arrived in an autonomous city, he would advise them to look at the local silk first. The guys touched it and said the silk was excellent quality. One of them wanted to buy it, but is it possible to exchange it for iron? This is the highest quality iron that is produced in their area. The lizard put it on a scale to test it for quality. He immediately realized that it was a 4th grade quality iron. They don't swap their silk for such low quality iron. They can take it back, and they can't trade for such iron. But they can exchange it for a special token, which can be given to them by the main exchange office of the city. The guys think he's making a mistake, and missing an opportunity to make a deal with them. Might not bother putting a price on that rag. The lizard got very angry. Do they even know how much it costs to produce silk of such high quality? Let them fail immediately. This incident was observed by ruler Kyung. Looks like this lizard has turned into a hardened peddler. But what were the elves doing here? They had always been rare visitors to their land. Was this their first time here? The girl decided to see how they did business. She was shocked by what she saw. These elves scout out newcomers or naive merchants. It's more like hunting in hopes of catching an occasional bargain. They're just scamming people, not trading honestly. The autonomous city has never seen such crooks. Where did these guys come from? Nebula got a message. As a new player, perhaps he has something to do with these elves? They had a need to discuss options for resolving the conflict around the autonomous city. But the elven settlements are far to the north. Is there really such an urgent need for a face-to-face conversation? He doesn't have much information about the lands north of them. If this conversation can help him find out information, there's no point in refusing. A sweet voice greeted Nebula. His name is Eldar, he is the god of the elves. And immediately the question went. Is Nebula the god that the people in this little castle worship? Is that a role player? An RP player who maximizes his role. It's not that rare to find a role player. Nebula said he was glad to meet you. Eldar said it was nice to meet you too. He hoped he was at least better than the hegemony. How does he know the hegemony? He replied that he had personally driven those vile barbarians from the northern coast. Does that mean the hegemony encountered him because he was forced out of the original land? Is this geeky role player that powerful? Nebula asked, so what does he want? We can get right to the point. The Eldar replied that he wanted Nebula to repay him, and then he would not destroy his influence in these lands and would leave him alone. Nebula decided not to answer him yet. A tribute is a tribute, in other words. The north coast he mentioned is notorious for its poor weather conditions. This makes it very difficult to explore with insects. Going there in person is dangerous. If he leaves his territory unattended, anything could happen to it. It's good to know that these conditions work both ways. He knows nothing about him, but neither does the Eldar. So these elves are probably scouts sent directly on his orders. Looks like they were less fortunate than he was at the start. The Eldar mentioned that they banished the hegemony, which in turn can only mean one thing. They have some safe place where faith in him thrives. Do not underestimate him. Nebula believes they will have to prepare for a full-scale war. At the same time, he'll find out what other players have accomplished besides hegemony. His name is Leonar, the eldest of a group of elves. He is pleased to meet the leader of the autonomous city. The elf understands the reason she visited them today. Believes Kyun is unhappy with one of the trade deals a member of their community made yesterday. Leonard knew she was coming to see them, so he prepared a gift for her. This is the item they found in the ancient ruins. Let them accept it in exchange. They would ask forgiveness for that bargain. Kyung said that this thing is without a doubt expensive. However, she has enough money. He's offering her the ruler of an autonomous city a bribe? She doesn't need one. Leonard picked up the jewel box and asked what she wanted then. The elves from the north had never come to them before. Why would they suddenly want to bargain with them? If they want to have a normal relationship with her, let them forget about the bribes and follow the accepted rules of the city. That's all she wants them to do. Leonard lowered his head and said he would do so from now on. And if they really want to gain her favor, why don't they buy it? The elf said they already believed in a dancing shadow god. Kyung asked, does it really matter? If they believe in two gods at once, wouldn't they get a blessing from both at once? They say that to no profit you have to go broke first. A message arrived from the elven chief, Kassadian. He sent a man demanding an apology. It is said that the last time they met, the ruler of the autonomous city demanded that the elves change their religion. Kyung said it's pure nonsense. People who can't see anything but their own faces have a nasty temper. Does that mean their faces were worth looking at? The girl said they would then launch a warning strike. Emphasized that they were trying to bribe the ruler of the autonomous city. The lizard thinks that's a good move. From what he had learned, it could be inferred that they would be back again in the same rainy season. Kyung said he was right, but they could expect a warm welcome. He would think of the most colorful offensive turns of phrase in the Ria prepared for them. The girl said that was right. Let him prepare not only speech but people for war. The guards saw the elven army coming. We must inform the castle governor. The elf leader was informed that the castle of the autonomous city lay ahead. It belongs to those very arrogant and shallow humans. When the dancing god of shadows gave the order to punish the infidels, Kassadian was a little surprised. But the task doesn't look too difficult. The chief raised his hand and shouted for everyone to get ready to attack. The Eldar decided that 300 warriors was more than enough to conquer this small castle. Its walls are high, but they are earthen, so it is not terrible. There are about 150 soldiers in the castle. These people's bows are too simple and crude. They are no match for their bows, which are 80 paces long. Kassadian said they'd bring the damned ruler of this subblock to his knees. Nebula watched all of this. He seemed to have expected this turn of events. Where would they strike? One of the warriors informed the chief that the soldiers of the autonomous city had encamped. They're in the canyon that leads to the castle. The scout counted there were about 7 dozen warriors. The people seemed to know they were coming. Had they really decided to leave the walls in such a small unit? The warrior shouted to the Cassadian chief to look back. There appeared troops that blocked the way they came. They were lizard men. Cassadian was shocked. Why would lizard men be helping a human castle? Eldar was confused. There was supposed to be only one opponent. Where did the second race come from? He immediately wrote to Nebula and began to charge. Why do these lizard men worship his ally? Are they ruled by another god? Toth asked why he shouldn't look at the list of players in the area before writing to him in person with such questions. Eldar looked at the list of players in the area and saw that there was only one player, and that was Nebula. The elf god didn't understand what was going on. Wasn't he the god of these people? Nebula replied that he is the god of men, but the lizards worship him too. How could that be when he was able to get himself a second race? The army of elves began to panic. The leader tried to cheer them up. Let them not be afraid. They outnumber the enemy. Have the front line prepare to meet the lizard men. But suddenly, human archers appeared from above the cliffs. Cassadian shouted to his troops to dodge arrows and defend themselves. Meanwhile, the lizard men were already attacking from below them. They were surrounded. The elves began to retreat, Cassadian still begging everyone to fight. They need to deliver the will of the dancing shadow god. The lizards have seen that the enemy is broken. They need to end this quickly. Chief Rakrak ordered the Pajihi to strike one last blow to kill them all. Eldar agreed he lost. Nebula asked so quickly, would he not interfere? The one replied that there was no point. The difference in strength is too great. But what does he want? Nebula replied that only 3 things: technology, information, and resources. The elf god thinks it's looting. If he doesn't go to his side, he has little chance of survival. Of course, it's not the entire list that is key, it's the information about the North Coast. Nebula asked again, does he accept the offer? Eldar thought that maybe things hadn't worked out so badly for him. His losses totaled 300 warriors. The remaining soldiers will simply not be enough to survive among the other players. This guy already has 2 races. If he had to go up against him again, what would be the outcome? Is overwhelmed by the mercy of Nebula, god of men and lizard men. He is willing to provide him with all information, resources, and technology. The Eldar will try to provide him with everything he may need in the future. Let him forgive his arrogance and let him tell all he knows about the North Coast. Nebula asked if he had any other allies. He replied that he did. There are 3 players on the North Coast: Solonose, Lim Chunshik, and him. They formed a loose alliance without any system. A player under the nickname Solonose controls a rare race, the Centaurs, though the advantage of their entire race is that they are cavalrymen, but increasing their numbers is quite difficult and they consume a lot of resources. Nebula doesn't think he wants them among his race that badly, but it's annoying that someone else has them but he doesn't. Also Lim Chunshik, he managed to compensate for the shortcomings of the ogre race. They are incredibly strong, but they have a terribly low intelligence. Nebula asked, the average Dikyu ogre is about 10? Eldar replied that was correct. He seems to have managed to increase their intelligence due to the small area advantage. The advantages of small areas are not limited to physical capabilities, but the human race is under his control, and he has bestowed upon them various varieties of blessings. With the right blessings, even an ogre civilization can be developed in a small area. It's a risk, but the stakes aren't bad. Li Chungshik is probably superior to Solonose in terms of strength. So Hegemony fought him? The Eldar said no. Hegemony borders him and Solonose. He didn't fight Lim Chungshik. Hegemony was facing a 3-on-1 problem. Most likely he was going to head south and settle there. And that's when he ran into him, and you already know the rest of the story. Just like that, with the disappearance of the Hegemony, Lim Chunshik began to demand excessive tribute, perhaps because he no longer needed Nebula. Eldar had a hard time accepting his new terms. That's why he demanded payment from Nebula the first time they met. Lim Chunshik seems to be friendlier to Solonose than to Eldar. Perhaps it's because centaurs are a nomadic tribe. The elf god asked, what does that have to do with it? Elves and ogres are sedentary tribes. The inhabitants believe that the size of the land signifies their strength. The fact that their relationship is deteriorating is inevitable. It's a land that will one day be taken over. Then what's the point of being friendly to it? After all, no matter when, his very first betrayal is to be expected. And on the other hand, the nomadic tribes are calm for now. but he doesn't know what will happen in the future. If a powerful rival appears in the north, Nebula will be in trouble. He thinks they can help each other for now. The Eldar asked what use he would be after losing his main army and priests. Nebula replied, he still has the blessings of the small territories. Doesn't he? Didn't he say his name was God of Dancing Shadows? In that case, he got the subdomain art early on. Eldar remembered that he had. Nebula told him that, in that case, they would do this. Eldar sent his prophet to a tribe of centaurs, namely the chief Tamarid. The chief asked to tell him the story he was preaching in the land. The man replied that the nearest prophecy to be fulfilled was that a king would come to their land, and when he arrives, a new world order will be established. Those who now rule will lose their positions, and those who roam the earth freely will be lost. Tamaridu asked, who is this king? The prophet replied that he was the one whom everyone worships, even the chiefs of the strongest tribes. The man said, no. Gods here on earth, no. But this king will be over it all God. The chief said that the one over whom only God stands means him. The prophet apologized, saying that it was not true. Tamaridu asked if he meant the lizards, about which there are so many rumors nowadays. The man replied that of course they were strong and fearsome, but they could not pass to the north coast because a very strong entity stood in their way. Whoever becomes king is a giant, standing on two legs with a huge body and sitting on a throne made of stones. He is stronger than the centaur and smarter than the elf. The chieftain asked, is this priest an ogre of Kijin? And will he have to serve him as king? The latter replied that it was so. Tamaridu said that he was mistaken and destroyed him in front of everyone. He is the great chief of Tamaridu, and he bows his head to none but God. Eldar said he did what Nebula told him to do. Everything going according to plan? Though Tamaridu looks angry now, he probably doesn't believe in the prophecy. They need to make the anticipation come true. They'll wait and see for a while. The centaur leader started having nightmares. How he can't climb the northern mountain. He was tormented by the words of the prophet. Why can't he become king? The same nightmare, is he obsessed with it? To get rid of her, maybe he needs to become king? Who in this wilderness knows the name Tamaridu? Does that mean he must see the ogre Kijin eventually become king? Suddenly a guest arrived at the chief's house. He told the warrior to tell him to come in. After that prophet, two more beings came to him. One of them is an elf from the green-eyed tribe, just like the prophet. He is different from the previous ones. The elf said that he had heard of a prophecy that Kijin, the leader of the ogres, would become king. The elf said that he had heard of a prophecy about Kijin, the leader of the ogres. The other came from an autonomous city. He had heard the news that a centaur chief would become king. He said he came to pay tribute. Everyone's talking about the king. Why is he so disturbed by the words he hears not directly from God? The last to arrive was a lizard. His name is Owen of the Black-Cheeked tribe. Chief Tamaridu asked, had he also come to ask him to be king? Owen replied that he didn't know much about the future, but if the chief didn't want to be ruler, he was here to talk him out of it. Tamaridu asked why, then, was he not worthy to become one? Or should he be recognized by the chiefs of other tribes? Owen smiled and asked, had the others recognized him yet? The elves and humans said he should be the one. What did the lizards think? He answered that he did not know. Chief Rakrak is also likely to endorse the idea. Owen figured that if he wanted such a title, he could dream of it as much as his soul desired. He thinks it's better for him not to become king. It's not about the level of training and ability, it's about whether God supports him. A God who does not hesitate to move forward. Why doesn't he want Tamaridu to be king? It's just an assumption. Just as there is a hierarchy between races on earth, there's a certain hierarchy among the gods, too. A god who doesn't hesitate to rush forward at their centaurs. It seems to Owen that their fearlessly rushing into battle is beneath the level of the infinitely beholding God. Tamaridu became angry and decided to destroy the lizard. How dare he insult their god? Owen said it's all about the hierarchy among them. So why is he mad at him? If Tamaridu is going to be angry, he should do so not at him, but at the god who subdued him. The chief wondered if it might be true. The dream he had every night could be an unpleasant omen. His heart is open to God. He didn't send him a prediction about becoming king. He asked him not to become one. If it's like the lizard said, what should he do? They, the black-cheeked warriors, will sometimes disobey the commander's orders if they deem it necessary. Maybe he should do the same with his god. He may have to do something his god doesn't want him to do. Now the centaur chief realized that he simply had to become king. He will go down a path that God does not want for him. Eldar had no idea that he could use the small art zone in such a way. Nebula said that what he would write was up to him. Everything that is created through human consciousness can be called art. Even if a race controlled by another player, he can get them to act differently, just as the controlling man would have wanted. Solonos will be a bit concerned after this one. Eldar said that it was certainly possible to create a division between the races, but he didn't think Nebula could do the same to the gods. He replied, "Why not?" Solonos must also realize the limits of nomadic growth. At some point, it would become difficult to compete with civilized humans. Eldar asked, "When that point comes, will Solonos be absorbed by Li Chunshik?" Nebula replied that was exactly right. He realized it himself, so there was a good chance that Solonos wouldn't be desperate to stop them. Solonos offers his sincere apologies. Temeridu disobeyed him. Li Chunshik said that it was fine. It was his mistake. He had ignored this elf face that had dreamed of this development from the beginning. He forced another player into it. Solonos didn't consider the possibility of that happening. The man thinks that no, he had to smoke hegemony. He's the one who owes him an apology. Soon Temeridu and Kijin will face off. And if he dies, he will lose one of his most important high priests. That's not what Solonos wanted to apologize for. He wanted to apologize that his Tamarida would be killed by his Kajina. Li Chun replied that he didn't think so. It would soon be verified who was right and who was wrong. The warrior Temeridu is a centaur, a high priest of 58 strength and 17 intelligence. Today they will find out who will be king. They will sweep away and crush the pitiful slaves of the ogres with their mighty hooves. Ogre Kijin said he knew Temeridu would do that. Does he really think he wouldn't have guessed that? The corpses of goblins hinder the centaurs. They take away mobility, robbing them of their mobility, but the chief doesn't care. He'll stomp them to dust and become king for the glory of his god. The leader of the ogres, Kijin, shouted, "How dare he betray them? He would regret it in his post-mortem." Ogre almost broke his neck, but Temeridu got out of the grapple. Of course he assumed it would be difficult since the ogres were the strongest race, and they had added intelligence. Centaurs are extremely rare, and besides, they've always been considered good warriors. He said no more than that lizard men were vulnerable to the cold. Would they be able to fight ogres? Nebula asked what was he talking about. The lizard men would not fight them. Surprised at his answer, Eldar asked what he meant. Nebula told him to forget about it. Then he asked what was his place in the player ranking. Eldar doesn't like to talk about it, but he ended up around the 3,400 spot. He thought it wasn't bad, but it wasn't a good result. Nebula initially assumed that the players were chosen based on their position in the rankings, because if all have pretty high spots on the top list, you could pick them at random. What were the conditions for becoming a player in this world in the end? Turning to him, he asked if the Eldar wanted to continue their partnership. He asked what Nebula was talking about. Eldar didn't understand what was the matter. What did he mean? What kind of cooperation? Lim Chunshik realized that he knew his nickname. He was ranked first in the top rankings. Rumor had it that this bastard had no aspirations, just playing and eating stupidly. And what were his chances of meeting him at the very beginning of the game? But this time luck turned to him and he won a lucky draw. And his primary race of insects and lizard men are vulnerable to the cold. When winter comes, he'll have no choice. He'll have to settle it all in one quick battle, and he's ready for it. Still, the man was in the top 20 in his best years. He's got to try and outplay the number one, right? Winter is coming. When will he go on the attack? Somewhere in the distance the man saw smoke. The thought of the elven village immediately came into his head. Lim Chun-shik wondered if that bastard was purposely some kind of distraction. Nebula said the tactic is capture and burn, also called scorched earth tactics. It's when you destroy every zone the enemy can occupy to block supplies. I'm sure he's had to use it before. Eldar realized his village was burning. Nebula evacuated the elves beforehand, so they're fine. But usually tactics aren't used this early. Nebula replied that's right, it usually fails early on. But this time he got lucky. Since the enemy is on the north coast now, it will be very difficult for them to protect food supplies. All transactions are under the control of the Black Shark tribe, and once the battle would have begun, they planned to rob the elves or trade with them to get goods. But now the elf village has been completely destroyed. The weakness of the ogres is that they eat a lot. Most likely they will not have enough supplies to prepare for winter. They haven't yet realized who's really weak against the cold. And Eldar is part of his good fortune, too. Usually strategies like this require burning your own land, but how lucky he was to have them on his land in the land of the elves. Nebula decided to wait a little longer. They wouldn't be able to survive a second winter. The head asked if they had escaped again. He replied that yes, there was no food left in the goblin villages now either. Because of the hunger, there are escapes every day. Ogre asked the chief if God had given him anything. He decided not to say anything. The leader immediately wondered, endlessly looking down on God. How much longer do they have to wait? Lim Chunshik realized they couldn't take it anymore. The man immediately decided to make a personal challenge. The man contacted Solonose. He asked how much strength he had left. The man replied that he had lost all his troops because of him. There was no one left. The man said that it had been a year. While Tamaridu fought Kijin, a black-skinned tribe of lizards took over his lands. Most died while fleeing, and as they scattered, they lost almost all faith. He was going to contact him himself, by the way, because that Eldar bastard had contacted him. The Eldar suggested he submit to Nebula as he did, and if would help them block him, they would let Solonose live. Solonose replied that of course he said no. Though he did think about the suggestion for a while. Even though they've had their differences lately, they've had so much time together. He could try to get him about 10 warriors and he would have enough faith for at least one more battle. The man replied that that was fine. They lost a lot of troops to him, but if they fight in the open, it will only be a battle between gods. If they meet him, they can destroy his main forces. Since Eldar has lost, it means he has lost a lot of divinity. Therefore, his descent is impossible. There are 2 of them, and Nebula is one. Gritting his teeth, the man said it wasn't too late. They could rebuild. Nebula saw they could easily destroy it. The 2 opponents appeared in the right place, the battlefield. They immediately began to attack the lizards. Nebula sent a huge force for his subordinates. They were able to fight the opponents with ease. Did they really think they could defeat him by simply descending from the heavens? Of course, he had anticipated this in advance. They had to wonder why Nebula didn't run away when fighting 2 against 1. It was obvious he was confident of his victory. Players Lim Chunshik and Solonose were sealed. If they die during their descent, they will lose a simply unbelievable amount of experience. And if the experience drops below the first one, if God is sealed, it is enough to destroy his statue for him to actually die. Of course, if you go through a certain process, you can break the seal. The fight was relatively easy, and since he had killed 2 gods, his level had increased. Nebula now has enough points to pump. He is now maxed out as much as he can at the moment. See you as suddenly he remembered he could get one random small area of his opponent's territory. New maps, he wondered what it would be. As it turned out, it was a swamp and birds. The swamp wasn't the best thing to get, but the birds were awesome. He'd been eyeing them for a long time, decided to start using it on the next generation. Even if it's not that significant, it will help him get ahead. Since he's straightened out the players he's encountered, it's worth dealing with the current situation as well. West, according to information obtained from Locusts, 5 players split into 3 factions, and they fight back against his attacks, leaving them alone until they start to cross the line and move on. East is the ocean. Right now it is more important to dominate the land, and we'll think about what lies beyond the mountains later. He needs to conquer those 2 sides before the player forces are fully strengthened there. Rakrak can't be in 2 places at once, so we'll have to use the elves in the north. There's no need to make his tribe suffer by tilling the barren land. They thought they had finally arrived at a new settlement, but it turned out they had just left where they had lived before and moved further north. The winters there are too long. They need to start cultivating the land again, but goblins and ogres will attack them. The elf didn't understand why they should suffer so much. Had the god of dancing shadows never said anything to them? He told me that he actually saw some prophecy yesterday. Someone to help the green-eyed tribe of elves will come from the south. One of the elves entered and said that a group of people were approaching them. It seemed to them that the prophecy was being fulfilled just at the right time. Leonard said he hoped they were the ones he had been told about. He ordered preparations for their arrival. All the elves prepared to greet the guests. As it turned out, it was the ruler of the autonomous city. The girl told him that she didn't recognize him a bit, as he had lost a bit of weight since the last time they met. Leonard invited them inside after his greeting, but the Lord immediately called out to Sira. After apologizing, he told me that he had to check the shack for assassins first. Once they checked everything out and sat down at the table, Leonard asked so what brought them there? Kyung replied that he must know since he also believes in God. She also saw the prophecy. Their blue beetle god wants them to help the weak and disadvantaged. That's why they brought weapons and tools for farming. She brought grain seeds that grow well in cold regions. Leonard told her thank you very much. Kyung replied that she would sell them to him cheaper. She told me that God had indeed told them to help, but that it was irrational to do so without some benefit. Leonard answered her that they had nothing. They couldn't even offer anything in return. They had spent too many resources to get there. She replied that she couldn't help then. They'd have to go back to the castle. The Lord is a firm believer that time is money. Leonard slapped his hand on the table and said enough. He understood perfectly well that they had come this far because they had what they needed. She replied that they didn't have anything after all, so what would they want? He said that even if they have nothing now, he knows that there is an iron mine there. The trees there are also tall, and since the land is good, the crops will grow well. Leonard said they could make a deal with an autonomous city at a low price. She asked, so he's willing to trade some nebulous future for a needed thing in the present? Leonard replied firmly that yes, he would personally guarantee the deal and put his name and reputation on the line. But they can't just make a deal on words. They need to leave some evidence of their promise. He thought that no matter how one looked at the situation, the value of iron ore and wood would be much higher in the future. He's trading his descendants' share. But if this deal doesn't happen, they may not have a future. The god of dancing shadows saw this coming and sent him a message. He would never leave them to perish. Leonard says the contract will be honored. Swears to God. She replied that she liked that phrase very much, perhaps agreeing with him. The alert told him that the first loan transaction on the north coast of the third continent had taken place. He realized that their world was getting wider and wider. Until now, the world for the dead civilizations only revolved around their tribes. Other races were only a potential threat, and how was it even possible to conduct normal trade with those who might have migrated to unknown places? But now that the inhabitants are settling down and the nomads are moving along a certain route, they draft their contracts in text form. Soon the buying and selling of intangibles and the value of the future will be commonplace. They go beyond simple business arrangements and begin to practice economic management. And how should he now govern this great and marvelous world? All the dwarves ran away. Rakrak said fine, let them clear the area. They fought back until the very end. Seemed very stubborn. But of course it was all pointless. So this is the end of the land. The lizards conquered the southern part of the land, as the blue bug god wished. Now all the lands of this peninsula belong to their tribe. If before he had to lead only the tribe, now Rakrak must also lead all the species in the land. But how can he do that? The ruling system, this is of concern to Nebula, since every system has its pros and cons. One option is feudalism, a type of government in which the king chooses the feudal lords and gives them land, while the feudals defend their lands, thus reducing the burden on the king. But the feudals' relationships with each other cannot be controlled in any way, leading to frequent civil wars. Of course, frequent wars can promote technology, but they are difficult to manage because they often lead to chaos. The other option is a monarchy, a government in which the king stays in the capital, and royal officials are sent to different areas to govern. Nebula would have liked to choose this option, but due to the constant national base, the professionalization of administrative work is enhanced. And because the central government is strong, it is easier to mobilize armed forces. But there are too many things to foresee. Routes, ports, the authenticity of the king, and systems for selecting officials. Nebula asked what Eldar thought about it. He replied, hasn't he made up his mind yet? Rakrak gathered everyone together to tell them about a dream he had last night. He flew away as if he had left his body and flew at high speed against his will, past the wildlands to the north shore. He passed countless lands beneath him, and these were the villages they were working hard to eliminate. This is where they are now. What's the name of this place? One of the lizards raised his hand. He knows this place. The dwarves call it Maganen, which means the end of the earth. Rakrak asked the next question. What was the name of the place where they destroyed the red-skinned ogres? The boys answered that they called it Saman. Saman turns out to be a lot of Saman, so Rak considered naming the place South Saman. What is the name of this land? Everyone looked, but no one knew the answer. Someone replied that no animal species lives there. Not only is it mountainous, but it is also where cockatrices live, so other species avoid going near it. Jail said, what does that mean? No one knows the name of this land? Rak replied that he knew the land. Although the land is surrounded by mountains, it is easy to make a path there, if only vines and small trees are taken care of. There is a valley deep in the mountain with a river running through it, and if they get to the bottom of the river, they will find a vast flat land. This river flows and meets the ocean. Jail asked if it was God who showed him this land in a dream. He replied that it was. The name of this land is Orizon. It means that this is the land where their God goes. By his will, he will become king of Orizon. They're going to Orizon. Even if many people living on this land recognize the power of the Rak, there are always those who will resist, so uniting everyone requires a lot of preliminary work. Many people need to know about Orizon, which will soon be the capital, and that Rak has become king. Every land should have a trail leading to Orizon. Since this is a monarchical system of government, there must be governors at the center. Rak plans to call these men military chiefs. First of all, it is necessary for laws to be uniform and applied throughout the country. However, with the autonomous city castle and the elven village, it will take some time, which basically already have feudals in them. He is going to send foreign officers to communicate and monitor them. Wei Kyung was given the title of Margrave of the autonomous city castle. Leonard has been titled the Elf of Maribgan. It's all primitive and sloppy, but there weren't many problems to solve. His nation had officially entered the early monarchy, so that was enough. Eldar asked, in the end it turns out Nebula uses both options? He replied that yes, he couldn't help it when looking at their pros and cons and choosing what was right for the situation. There was only one thing Eldar couldn't understand. Why would Nebula make his kind part of his kingdom? He replied that it was his land too, so that's the way it is.